My mom prioritized my sister's brief romance over supporting me during motherhood and the birth of her grandchild. I, 32F, work as an emergency room physician at a large Boston hospital. My baby was christened 2 days ago after I gave birth to her a few weeks ago. My mother, 58F, is now upset that I did not ask her to the wedding or even select her as a godparent. I would like to describe the complex circumstances that resulted in this choice. My relationship with my ex, 34M, a cardiologist at our hospital, ended during my pregnancy, thus I voluntarily became a single mother. After meeting during residency, we dated for 3 years and lived together for 2, which I considered to be a stable relationship. Given our steady jobs and long-term relationship, I brought up marriage when I found out I was expecting. He said nonetheless, that he needed more time to determine whether he was prepared for marriage. I knew I couldn't wait forever at that point in my life because I had a demanding job in emergency medicine. I threatened to end our relationship if he didn't propose. I'm accustomed to making snap decisions because I work as an emergency room physician, and I was ready to be a single mother. Even before I gave him the ultimatum, I knew in my heart that we would end our relationship. What successful marriage begins with one after all? I was right when he moved out in a matter of weeks. At first, he said he wanted to play the role of father. But he also decided he wasn't prepared for fatherhood following our separation. He's now paying child support after I hired a lawyer and spoke with legal medical colleagues. He is welcome to visit at any time, but he hasn't expressed any interest in me, even though I have full custody. I need to focus on my cardiology fellowship right now, he said, almost as if I weren't balancing my own medical career while pregnant. However, my mother's actions during this whole ordeal are the true problem, not my ex. I was mentally in a bad place when my relationship ended early in my pregnancy. Since we are educated to spot the symptoms of depression as medical professionals, I realized I needed help. My coworkers also noticed, particularly when working lengthy overnight shifts in the emergency room. Families usually help out in these kinds of situations, but my friends were the only ones who really stood by me. While running their own medical practices, my 2 best friends from residency, Kelly, 31F, a pediatrician, and Maria, 32F, another emergency room physician, came to see me as much as they could. I automatically chose them to be my daughter's godmothers because they were the only people who were with me when I went into labor. My mother's exclusion was not a hasty decision. I worked extra ER shifts to earn money for maternity leave while I was pregnant, living alone in my condo close to the hospital. Working 12-hour shifts while pregnant and handling trauma cases wasn't easy. Since Kelly's hospital is distant from mine and Maria is married with a small son, I turned down my friend's offer to stay with me closer to my due date. I had wanted to depend on my mom. She abruptly became more active in my life after finding out about my pregnancy on social media. We weren't very close before that because she usually gave preference to my younger sister, Lisa, 25F. There was an obvious division in our family dynamics. Dad and I were one unit, and Lisa and Mom were another. We only got to see each other on birthdays or holidays once I departed for college. When my dad died 2 years ago after an unexpected heart attack, everything changed. I was working an emergency room shift that night, so I wasn't blind to the irony. My already shaky relationship with my mother and sister was all but broken after his funeral. Even though Lisa and Mom were still inseparable, there was always an imperceptible barrier between us when I first saw them. I eventually came to terms with the fact that Mom valued Lisa more. I found it strange that Mom's conduct altered when I told her I was pregnant. As she started to visit, she expressed her excitement about being a grandma. I phoned her to ask her to stay with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, when I was having a lot of back discomfort after working longer shifts. She made a commitment but abruptly canceled, saying she didn't feel safe leaving her house unattended because of thefts in her neighborhood. Despite my severe disappointment, I handled things on my own and didn't pursue the issue. But my mother was the first person I phoned when I went into labor while working the night shift at the hospital. When I told her that I needed her there with me, she first claimed that she was too busy to make it happen. I couldn't comprehend what kind of obligations she could have because it was 2 a.m. on a Sunday. She finally acknowledged that she couldn't be there because she had to be there for Lisa when I pressured her, getting more and more upset in between contractions. She was unable to be with me during the last few weeks of my pregnancy, apparently because Lisa had moved in with her a few weeks prior. Being there for Lisa was the first priority, according to my mother, who revealed that she had recently been abandoned by her boyfriend and was in a very vulnerable state of mind. I was in too much pain to fight, but I honestly couldn't understand how anything could be more significant than being there when your grandchild was born. I hung up after she gave me her explanation and instead called Maria and Kelly. Maria, who works at my hospital, arrived in 15 minutes, took care of all the medical papers, and Kelly arrived right in the delivery room. They supported me the entire time, including helping me get settled for the next few days until I felt confident enough to be alone with the baby. In contrast, my mother didn't get in touch with me for a whole week following the birth of my child. Behaving as casually as if nothing had happened, she texted to ask whether she could come that day. "Hello, sweetie. I thought I'd stop by today to see my granddaughter," she wrote in her message. "What time is most effective?" I didn't reply since that really got under my skin. I acted as though I wasn't home when she unexpectedly arrived that night and stayed until she departed. After that, she kept messaging and tried contacting me multiple times, but I never answered. It's amazing that she never felt the need to express regret or even to admit what had occurred. She continued to send texts like, "Missing my grandbaby" and "Can't wait to babysit," acting as though nothing was wrong. She must have noticed I was angry with her after a time. But rather than offering a clear apology, she had Lisa text me to try to justify what she had done. The fact that Lisa's letter began, "I'm really sorry that mom couldn't be there because of me when you went into labor," only served to exacerbate the problem. "However, you must comprehend what I was going through." She went on to say that after dating him for just 2 weeks, she had been dumped by someone she had loved for a very long time. She seems to have had feelings for this man since college. She never made a move because he had a girlfriend at the time. Even after graduating, she remained friends with him, stayed in touch with him, and still harbored feelings for him. After a recent breakup with his fiancée, that guy asked Lisa out 3 weeks later. After 2 weeks of dating, he told her he was not ready for another committed relationship so soon after terminating his long-term one and that he simply wanted to be friends. He blocked her everywhere and called her psychotic and crazy for taking a casual rebound so seriously after Lisa became upset and began to argue with him. In a normal situation, I could have felt sorry for her. However, Lisa is not a youngster going through her first heartbreak. She is 25 years old. He was only using her as a rebound, and she should have known it. Even worse, her friends specifically advised her not to approach him because they knew he had recently ended a committed relationship. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. And I was incensed that our mother chose not to attend her granddaughter's birth because she couldn't handle ending her relationship with a man she had dated for 2 weeks. This came after 9 whole months of feigning excitement over the baby. Since neither of them could see anything wrong with their actions, Lisa's message just made matters worse. I blocked them both on social media, email, and the phone. It was around a week before they tried to get in touch with me again in any other way. The christening ceremony in the church where our family has been for centuries followed. Only a few of my hospital co-workers attended the small, private ceremony, including my aunt, with whom I have a great relationship, and my godmothers, Maria and Kelly. My mother somehow found out about the ceremony even though I'm positive none of these folks told her about it. Since she knows them from her years of volunteering at the church, I have a suspicion that one of the choir women may have told her. I'm going to report the person in question to the church administration because their gossip was very uncalled for and created a lot of drama. When my mother learned, she came to my condo the day after the christening. My mom wouldn't leave, even when I claimed I wasn't home, and I was attempting to put my daughter to sleep after a very demanding morning. She simply continued to ring the doorbell repeatedly. My daughter was becoming more and more agitated by the minute, so after 30 minutes of this, I opened the door to face her. She began scolding me right away for not being designated godmother and not being invited to the christening. We got into a furious disagreement when I told her that I had already made up my mind and that she couldn't change it. Her explanation was that she was merely attempting to support Lisa because, in her words, she was obviously going through something terrible. At least you had your doctor friends by your side, my mother said. However, Lisa's friends had specifically advised her not to date that guy, so she was unable to even discuss her problems with them. All she had to talk to was me, and she was struggling greatly. She moved in with me for that reason. She couldn't stand being by herself. Instead of being so cold and selfish, you ought to have shown more empathy as the older sister. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I told her that I didn't feel sorry for Lisa because she was solely to blame, and I felt even less sorry for my mother because she took the decision to not support me throughout delivery, not to mention to break her commitment to assist me in the last few weeks of my pregnancy. I could hear my daughter crying inside before the conflict got out of hand. I informed my mother that I couldn't waste time arguing with her about her bad decisions because I had to look after my child. Before I phoned security, I urged her to leave and shut the door in her face. Even when she eventually left, things didn't stop there. Since then, a number of my hospital co-workers have informed me that my mother has been disparaging me on social media, calling me evil and self-centered. I've seen the screenshots that people have sent me while I blocked her. I've done everything in my power to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't see that. She wrote in one of her posts. I can't be in one place at once. Being cut off from my granddaughter's life is my punishment for choosing to be there for the daughter who had no one else. My heart breaks for Lisa, who still hopes her sister will understand what she was going through, she said in another post. Although Lisa feels bad for causing me to miss the birth of my first grandchild, she is not the issue. I wish some people weren't so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. I was deeply affected by the most recent post. Karma always comes back around, she wrote. When you experience this firsthand as a mother, we'll see how you feel. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child can. So I'll forgive you for everything. A number of family members have contacted me, advising me to simply speak with Lisa and Mom and attempt to comprehend their perspective. My mother's posts have even been shared by certain members of my extended family, who have commented on them about how I'm tearing the family apart. I want an outside opinion even though I don't think I've done anything wrong. The stress of returning to work in the emergency room while taking care of a newborn isn't helping, and I'm aware that pregnancy and new motherhood can make you more emotional and irritable. However, it seems to me that my mother made her decision apparent when she put my sister's 2-week relationship drama ahead of the arrival of her grandson. Every day as physicians, we are taught to make tough choices, some of which require balancing conflicting priorities. That night, my mother made a decision as well. And she must now deal with the fallout. I've made the decision to put my daughter in a stable, drama-free home with folks who have shown they will truly be there for us when we need them. Update 1. Since my last post and the events that followed, I have given this situation a lot of thought from every perspective. Since some of you requested to see what was being stated, I would like to share the specific postings my mother has made since her social media campaign has escalated. I have tried my best to be a good mother to both of my daughters, but I guess some people just can't understand that I can't be everywhere at once, she wrote in her initial post. Therefore, I made the decision to support the daughter who was experiencing the greatest type of heartbreak and had no one else to lean on. Yes, that makes me the world's largest villain, but what does that make the daughter who excluded me from her life for such a trivial reason, and who refused to let me attend my granddaughter's baptism, any less of a monster? The epithet heartless would be appropriate. A few hours later, the second message said, I feel very sorry for Lisa. Lisa continues to hope that perhaps my other daughter will be understanding and attempt to comprehend what she was going through despite everything that has transpired. But I'm aware that it's useless. I know Lisa isn't the issue, but she doesn't want to be the reason I never get to be my first granddaughter's godmother. All I want is for her to see that and quit holding herself responsible for whatever has occurred. Additionally, I wish that some individuals would quit being so narcissistic and egotistical that they are unable to comprehend their sister's suffering. Yesterday's post, Karma Always Strikes Back, was the most current. A mother cannot be selfish, but a child may, so I will see you through this as a mother and forgive you for anything. She has shared numerous depressing statements about the challenges of motherhood in addition to these significant posts. She has gone to considerable lengths to describe all the drama in detail and paint me as the bad guy for everyone who contacts her directly to ask what's going on. I handle actual situations on a daily basis as an emergency physician. I find it not only upsetting but almost amusing when my mother and family attempt to portray my sister's 2-week relationship drama as some sort of serious problem that excused her from attending her grandchild's birth. I've received regular messages from a number of my relatives and uncles accusing me of being needlessly harsh with my mother and sister. One aunt even said that I should get therapy before I irreversibly harm my relationship with my family since I may be stubborn because of postpartum depression. Additionally, I've gotten messages from members of my extended family that I haven't spoken to in years. They are all suddenly quite knowledgeable about the dynamics of my family. They constantly talking about how supportive my mother was during my pregnancy, conveniently ignoring the fact that her support primarily took the form of remarks on social media and sporadic visits when it suited her. I'm even more sure of my choice now that I've read all of their messages and seen my mother's posts. That night, my mother made her decision. Her daughter going into labor was not as important to her as my sister's romantic disappointment. The facts won't change, no matter how much she tries to change the story. I will refrain from participating in their social media drama. I won't try to explain myself or post my side of the story to relatives who have already made up their minds. My daughter and my career must be my top priorities. I have to take care of a newborn while working 12-hour shifts in the emergency room. I don't have time or energy for folks who are solely interested in making my life more stressful. Through it all, Maria and Kelly have been amazing. In addition to bringing food and checking in on us, they have been volunteering to monitor the baby while I take a break between shifts. I want people like this in my daughter's life, people who are there when it counts, not just when it's convenient. So, no, I don't believe I'm being harsh or callous. Regarding who I can and cannot rely on, I'm being practical. I made my choice, and my mother made hers. Update 2. Since my last post, which was about a week ago, things have gotten much worse. My mother must have realized that her online drama campaign wasn't receiving the response she was hoping for because I haven't replied to any of her posts on social media. She made the decision to come see me again this morning, but this time she brought Lisa along. After a particularly long night shift in the emergency room, I was at home trying to get my kid to go asleep when they unexpectedly arrived. They said they wanted to apologize through the door, but I didn't want to get into another argument right then. I was aware that they would ultimately want to clear the air, which would entail repeating everything that had transpired, even if I answered the door and they apologized. I lacked the mental and physical stamina to do that. Through the door, I informed them that I had just placed my kid to sleep and was occupied with her. I clarified that if they truly wanted to apologize, they would have to wait until I was free to speak because I wasn't in the right frame of mind for a conversation at the moment. Knowing that if I was impolite, they may start yelling and wake my daughter, I made an effort to be as courteous as possible. However, they began yelling anyhow, so I shouldn't have bothered to keep things civil. They drove all the way here, and I had refused to even open the door to let them in, so they started scolding me for being rude. Just so you know, I hadn't requested that they do any of that. My mother began yelling at me, accusing me of destroying the family and using my daughter as a weapon against her. Lisa added that I was being theatrical and self-centered about the whole thing. Despite the fact that a baby was napping inside, they continued to get louder and louder. Something inside of me exploded as I heard my daughter begin to stir and fuss via the baby monitor. I opened the door and made it clear that I would call the police and request a restraining order if they didn't leave my property right away. They appeared surprised, most likely because they didn't think I would defend myself. My mother attempted to explain that I was exaggerating and that, as a grandma, she had rights. At least Lisa appeared to understand that I wasn't playing a bluff. She began dragging our mom away. Despite being pulled away, my mother continued to move. She continued to yell things like, "You'll regret this when you need my help," and curse at me while calling me derogatory names. And "you can't deny me my granddaughter indefinitely." As she pulled her away, Lisa murmured to herself that I was always like this, and that I was never able to deal with things like a normal person. I decided not to call the police this time because I didn't want to make things worse, but I won't think twice if they come by again. Their actions are now having an impact on my daughter, so it's no longer just about me. She was crying from all the chaos and completely awake when I returned inside. I've already told the security staff at my building about the incident and given them my sister's and mother's descriptions. In case I ever need to pursue legal action, I also kept a record of everything that happened, including the time and the words that were said. I'm not keeping them away from my daughter because I'm upset about what transpired during my labor, to be clear. They have repeatedly demonstrated that they don't respect boundaries and will always put their own feelings ahead of my daughter's welfare, which is why I'm keeping them away. The most recent instance of such was today. At least their actions made it quite evident that I am not at all like my mother. Even if she may not care about me, I will stop at nothing to shield my child from harmful conduct, even if it means severing familial relations. Update 3. My life has mercifully returned to a manageable pattern since my previous post, which was almost 2 months ago. Overall, things have been going well, despite my extreme workload at work and taking care of my baby. I haven't spoken to my mother or Lisa in weeks, and Maria and Kelly come to visit often to spend time with my kid and me. Lisa continued to try to get in touch for some time. She made several other social media accounts to message me after I blocked her initial one. In those letters, she described how, because Mom was so furious over everything, she had taken the side of our mother in the most recent argument. Lisa asserted that Mom was too arrogant to acknowledge her mistakes because of her advanced age. Lisa asked me to initiate contact in order to help Mom mend her bond with her granddaughter. Regardless of how many texts she sent, I never replied to any of them. She seemed to grow weary of making new accounts eventually and gave up completely. I sincerely appreciate that because my position has not changed. My mother must apologize before I will consider forgiving her. I won't consider allowing her to become a grandmother until after that. I'm perfectly happy with my life as it is right now. Taking care of my baby has become a lot simpler after I switched to more regular day shifts at the hospital. My coworkers have been tremendously supportive, particularly the parents among them. They're aware of the difficulties in juggling a rigorous medical job with being a single mom. Our lives have become even more reliant on Maria and Kelly. My daughter has effectively adopted Maria's 3-year-old boy as her big brother, and it's adorable to watch them interact at our weekend get-togethers. In order to administer all of my daughter's examinations and immunizations individually, Kelly has been organizing her pediatric clinic schedule. It is impossible to overstate the difference between my mother's actions and my friend's unwavering support. My mother and sister appear to think that the secret to establishing relationships is using theatrical gestures and emotional manipulation, even though Maria and Kelly have assimilated into our daily lives effortlessly. They still don't realize that trustworthy behavior, not ostentatious, theatrical displays of emotion when it suits them, is what builds trust. At last, some of my relatives have begun to distance themselves. Some have even expressed regret for becoming involved before fully understanding the situation. Initially supporting my mother, one aunt said that she had observed similar patterns of manipulative conduct from mom in previous family contexts. In this calm setting, my daughter is flourishing. Kelly reassures me that she is in excellent health and that she is meeting all of her developmental goals on time. For both of us, the consistency of our current regimen has been excellent. There are moments when I question whether my mother is aware that she isn't getting to see her granddaughter grow up. She was unable to put her daughter's needs first during one of the most important times in life, not because I'm trying to be spiteful. Her priorities are clear from the fact that she put Lisa's small romantic setback ahead of attending her grandchild's birth. I recognize the irony that, despite my mother accusing me of using my daughter as a weapon, she attempted to mend our relationship, but only on her terms, by utilizing my pregnancy and her position as a grandmother. She desired all of the benefits of being a grandma without having to deal with the obligations or compromises that come with the position. I've gained a great deal of knowledge about motherhood over the last few months. It's now quite evident that being a mother involves being there for your child when they need you, not just when it's convenient or when you want something. My mother's behavior during my pregnancy and labor gave me a clear indication of the type of grandma she would be, someone who puts Lisa's drama and her own demands before of my daughter's welfare. I'm concentrating on creating the secure, caring atmosphere I want for my daughter to grow up in right now. Even if she doesn't have as many biological relatives, she does have something much more valuable: grown-ups who always prioritize her needs. The door isn't shut all the time. I would think about reintegrating my mother into our life if she ever truly admits her actions and extends a heartfelt apology. However, I refuse to wait for that to occur. Furthermore, I will not jeopardize my daughter's emotional health in the meanwhile. Protecting your child from harmful family dynamics might sometimes be the healthiest thing you can do for them, even if it means avoiding your own mother. At my late husband's funeral, my in-laws returned after 8 years, demanding control of our company and house as his biological parents. Recently, I, a 34-year-old woman, lost my 38-year-old spouse to leukemia. After 10 years of dating and 8 years of marriage, we were business and life partners. As I deal with an unforeseen circumstance that arose at his funeral, I am still trying to digest everything. 5 years ago, my husband received a leukemia diagnosis. In recent months, his condition dramatically worsened despite intensive treatment. He stayed committed to our plastic recycling company, which we started from the beginning, despite his illness. He would video call me to talk about operations and future plans, even from his hospital bed. He was committed and progressive all the way to the end, and that was simply who he was. His funeral last week was where the real trouble started. I was surprised to see my brother-in-law, 40, and my in-laws, both 65 there. After a major falling out over our business endeavor, they had not spoken to us for 8 years. They had consistently given preference to my brother-in-law, treating my husband as though he were somehow less deserving of their care and assistance. They made a concerted effort to dissuade my husband when we first started our firm, saying he was simply mimicking his brother, who had announced a similar initiative. However, this was after we had already completed our market research and started establishing our business. I remained calm and kept my distance from them during the funeral service. But when the majority of people had left, my in-laws came up to me and said they had important things to talk about. At first, people tried to seem understanding by offering their sympathies and inquiring about my husband's last days. I responded succinctly, recalling that they were aware of his health but never paid him a visit during his illness. Then their real motivations became apparent. They began discussing proper inheritance and family responsibilities. To my surprise, they insisted that I give them full control of our company, saying that my brother-in-law could help them run it more effectively. They changed their strategy and demanded our house after I adamantly refused. Their justification was especially offensive. They said that a widow without children didn't require such a large house and that they could make more money by renting out their current residence. Their boldness left me speechless. My husband and I had planned our future together, and this was the house we had created. We have recollections of our lives together in every nook and cranny. It seemed as though they were attempting to obliterate our entire history with their demand. They got combative, threatening legal action and asserting their rights as his parents when I told them that this was not happening at all. They are unaware that my spouse had prepared for this possibility because he thought it might occur. He made a video addressing his parents in particular a month prior to his death. If they ever attempted to seize his assets after his passing, he wanted me to play it for them. I now see why he believed it was important, even if at the time I thought he was being too careful. I have yet to play the video for them. I drove home crying after they threatened me at the funeral, and I didn't think about it until I was by myself in our house. I need to gather my strength before I confront them with the contents of the tape, even though I know it will change everything. I'm concentrating on managing our company for the time being, as my husband and I had intended. He ensured that all the legal documentation was in order at the time of his initial diagnosis. Even though I know I'm right, their demands and threats are making an already unbearably difficult period emotionally taxing for me. I'm having a lot of trouble deciding when to show them the video. A part of me is eager to get it over with, and another part of me wants to wait until they really attempt to file a lawsuit. In any case, I am aware that this is not yet finished. My in-laws' treatment of my spouse throughout his life is painfully recalled by the current circumstance. I observed the glaring disparity in their treatment of their boys when we initially began dating in our mid-20s. Despite his troubles with alcohol and his incapacity to maintain a job, they believed that my brother-in-law could do no wrong. My husband, on the other hand, who put in a great deal of effort at work and always attempted to support his family, was only criticized and dismissed. The last straw for me was a specific Christmas dinner almost 8 years ago. Instead of celebrating the fact that we had just landed our first significant contract for our recycling firm, my in-laws spent the entire evening disparaging our endeavor in comparison to my brother-in-law's comparable business concept. It's important to note that after learning of our achievement, he quickly came up with his strategy. A furious dispute broke out during the dinner when my father-in-law said my husband was overly ambitious and needed to know his place. We didn't really communicate with them again after that. My husband finally understood that their toxic behavior would never change, even though he had always sought their praise despite my advice to advocate for himself. Their total absence during my husband's illness is what makes their current actions even more egregious. We didn't deliberately conceal his leukemia diagnosis from them. Even though they must have been aware of how bad his situation was, they never once inquired about it, sought out, or expressed any desire in getting back together, even though the news had traveled through family connections and they lived in the same city. Over the past 5 years, we have solely concentrated on expanding our company and helping one another during his medical treatment. 3 states had taken notice of our plastic recycling firm, and we were even highlighted in a number of environmental business periodicals. Even on his hardest days in the hospital, my husband would light up when we discussed our most recent projects or our goals for future growth because he was so pleased with what we had created together. His final month of life was especially challenging. When he realized he was running out of time, he started organizing things very methodically. He recorded that video message for his parents, reorganized all of our business records, and revised his will. I recall the day he took the recording. Despite being in his hospital room, he insisted on wearing his favorite business outfit because he was having one of his best days. He handled things with remarkable composure, far more so than I did. He warned me that day, they'll try to take everything we built, not because they need it, but because they never believed in me. Within ourselves. They will want to demonstrate that they were correct all along. He forced me to make a commitment to maintain my ground and defend the things we had created together, including our shared dream as well as our worldly possessions. I've only seen the video message he taped that day once, but it's really impactful. He talks about all the years of partiality, the contemptuous remarks, and the occasions when they choose to believe in his brother rather than him. But in its clarity, it is painful, honest, and unvarnished. It is neither furious nor bitter. He also talks about me, how everything we created together was intended to remain just that, ours, and how I was ultimately the only family he truly had. I received a string of progressively hostile texts from my in-laws the day following the altercation at the burial. They asserted that they were morally entitled to his legacy since they were his parents. Totally ignoring their own part in the alienation, they even implied that I had somehow coerced their son into removing them from his life. I had stolen their son and was now stealing his legacy, and their most recent mail threatened to expose this. My spouse had painstakingly documented everything, which made their threats all the more ridiculous. Every significant choice pertaining to our company was decided upon collaboratively and documented appropriately. All of our accomplishments were the result of years of diligence, forethought, and commitment, exactly the traits his parents had disregarded in him all of his childhood. I came upon a picture from our first business meeting last night while perusing some old pictures at his home office. Sitting at our small leased office space with our first recycling machine, we were so youthful and full of hope. My husband's parents had refused to assist, claiming it was a silly dream, so he had taken out a personal loan to purchase that equipment. By transforming that one machine into a cutting-edge operation with more than 50 employees, we disproved their claims. He had preserved some old emails, including ones from his parents, which I also found. It was like witnessing their relationship fall apart in slow motion as you read through them. Their criticism made every accomplishment seem less significant, and every accomplishment was compared to his brother. In fact, they accused him of wanting to eclipse his brother by launching our company in their most recent email, which was sent 8 years ago. Ironically, they never believed in his legacy when he was alive, but now they say they deserve it. They never paid us a visit, never acknowledged our accomplishments, and never showed any curiosity about what we had constructed. They didn't get in touch, even after our creative recycling technique was highlighted in the local media. However, now that he's gone, they feel the need to take possession of all he put so much effort into creating. They want to challenge the will, according to their most recent threat, which they got this morning. They say they have proof that I had an undue effect on my husband in his last days. It's nearly absurd. He was more focused and resolute than ever in those last days. He made sure that everything was legally guaranteed because he knew exactly what he wanted. My in-laws have no case, according to the legal team at our company, with whom I have been talking. My husband's will is unambiguous and compliant with the law, and everything is appropriately recorded. Additionally, they have encouraged me to preserve all correspondence from my in-laws because their threatening comments can prove helpful in the event that this goes to court. When they unexpectedly arrived at our corporate headquarters yesterday, it was their most recent attempt at intimidation. Demanding to address the board of directors, they created quite a stir in the lobby. It's still the family business we started together, and we don't even have a board. They yelled that they would expose the truth about how their kid was coerced out of his family before our security team had to escort them out. The most agonizing aspect of it all is seeing them destroy their own son's legacy in an effort to seize what he created. My spouse finally realized that nothing he accomplished would ever be good enough after years of attempting to gain their favor. He ultimately found serenity in embracing that and concentrating on our shared life. Everything will be different because of the video he left behind. In addition to addressing their recent attempts to seize his money, he also directly addresses their years of favoritism and emotional manipulation. Speaking with the same quiet strength he often displayed in business meetings, he taped it while sitting in his hospital room in his finest suit on one of his final lucid days. I'm going to their house tomorrow to show them the footage. I've come to the conclusion that waiting any longer is pointless. They must know precisely where they are and why. My husband planned for their behavior since he knew them well enough to anticipate it. It's time for them to hear his parting speech. Just in case things go out of hand, I've already made plans for our lawyer to be available tomorrow. This video's content goes beyond simply criticizing their most recent actions. It provides a thorough description of how they treated him over the course of his life, including particular incidents and dates. Even in this, he was meticulous. The thing that most amazes me about this whole situation is exactly what my spouse predicted it would be. He was aware that they would want to take credit for the things we created together, not because they were proud of them but more because they would never be able to believe that he was successful without their help. He knew that, like they had done during his life, they would attempt to discredit his decisions even after he passed away. The irony is that things may have turned out differently if they had even a small amount of interest in his life during his leukemia battle. However, they made the decision to remain silent throughout his entire sickness, never contacting him or inquiring about his health. They now have the audacity to assert ownership of what he and I jointly constructed. I'm not only defending our company and our house, I'm defending his legacy, our common goal, and the real him, not the son they rejected, but the intelligent, compassionate, and driven man who created something significant in spite of their lack of belief in him. They will finally hear his final words to them tomorrow, and they will see why their allegations are unfounded. I'm currently fortifying myself and getting ready for the future. As he would have desired, the business is still thriving, and his parents will soon, very soon, find out precisely how their son felt about their unexpected interest in his legacy. Update 1. I wanted to share some updates from my last post, which was a week ago. Despite the huge emotional toll of losing my husband and coping with his parents' threats, I'm lucky to have an amazing support network. To assist me cope with this new reality, my parents have temporarily moved in with me. Although he still works, my father has taken up all of my husband's practical responsibilities, including food shopping, housework, and bill payment. I've never been good at remembering to buy necessities. Since our housekeeper just resigned for personal reasons, my mother has been handling the cooking and cleaning. Unbeknownst to me, Their presence has been a blessing. Concentrating on my profession has become essential to me. The fantastic team my husband and I created together is primarily responsible for the efficient operation of our company today. Throughout this trying time, they have demonstrated amazing loyalty and support. During our management meeting last week, a number of longtime staff members related how my husband had aided their professional development. Hearing these recollections was both touching and devastating. But sometimes I'm hit hard by the fact that he's not here. His coffee mug was still on the desk, just where he left it on his last day of work, and I almost lost it when I was in his office yesterday trying to find some paperwork. I miss the little things we used to do together. Like having coffee in the morning, talking about company plans, taking lunch together, and even jokingly arguing about how to organize files. The ongoing fear of legal action from my in-laws is what makes things more difficult. Yesterday, their attorney got in touch with our legal team and made nebulous claims regarding familial rights and undue influence. Even though our attorneys told me that these accusations are unfounded, dealing with these attacks during a time of grief is nonetheless extremely taxing. Our clients' and business partners' support has been tremendous. Several people have expressed their confidence in my abilities to continue running the company, and many have written poignant letters about their experiences working with my spouse. It means a lot, especially in light of my in-laws' attempts to cast doubt on my competence to manage the company. In part to keep myself occupied and in part to make sure everything keeps going well, I've been putting in more hours at the office. Our environmental impact objectives have always been very important to my spouse, and I'm committed to upholding and advancing his vision. He was very enthusiastic about a project we are now discussing. The opening of a new recycling center in a neighboring state. Through it all, my parents have been incredible. One of them is always available if I need assistance thanks to the rotation system they have set up. In an attempt to better understand my day-to-day existence, my mother has even begun to study about how our firm is run. In order to filter out any efforts at communication from my in-laws, Dad has been taking care of all the incoming mail and phone calls. Coming home to our residence every evening is the most difficult part. Every room has memories, and without him, it can feel impossible at times. However, I'm making an effort to put more emphasis on my appreciation for the 10 years we had together than on the future we lost. Grief is the cost of love, as my mother always reminds me, and my spouse was worth every cry. Update 2. My in-laws decided to challenge the will 2 weeks ago. Our lawyer told me about the formal proceedings during our recent meeting. Even though we're not overly concerned about the result, dealing with this pointless legal dispute at this already trying time is aggravating. Now my in-laws have changed their strategy. They tried to scare me with their alleged plan in an email they sent me yesterday. They said they were entitled to everything since they were his flesh and blood and that my attempt to scare them away with the video, which I haven't even shown them yet, wouldn't work. They even went so far as to declare that they no longer only came for the property. They now feel entitled to shares in the company. Fortunately, courts do not function according to what individuals believe they are entitled to. The communication actually thrilled my lawyer, who said it would be helpful proof of their objectives. I sent all of this information to our legal staff, who are constructing a more compelling argument against their assertions. All of this has been made possible by my parents' tremendous support. In the hopes that they could react better to a different set of parents, they even offered to speak with my in-laws, but I turned them down. I want them to proceed with their case at this point because I am certain that it will be a complete waste of their time and money, which is precisely what I desire given their actions. The last several weeks have been hectic, with a steady flow of people coming to see how I'm doing or to express condolences since they were unable to make it to the service. I've hardly had time to think about my own emotions because I've been so busy taking care of business and entertaining myself. However, I nearly lost it the other day while I was in my husband's office trying to find some documents pertaining to my job. I only hoped I could speak to him again, to express my love and miss him, because I could picture him there so vividly. My top priority right now is making sure our company keeps growing. I am aware that he would have preferred that. His drive has inspired me to put in even more effort. Even on the most difficult days, I am motivated to keep going by his vision for the success of our business. With all the paperwork my husband left behind, our legal team is confident in our position. Responses to any possible allegations of undue influence or family rights have already been drafted. Everyone involved in the issue understands the irony of my in-laws attempting to assert any rights after 8 years of total silence. It's touching to see how many lives my husband affected, and my mother has taken to arranging all of the messages and condolence cards we've received. His honesty and inventiveness in the field have been documented by colleagues, business associates, and even rivals. My in-laws' present attempts to portray him as someone who was coerced out of his family are in sharp contrast to these testimonies. The most challenging aspect is keeping my cool during this entire ordeal. Whether it's another threatening email from my in-laws or just the agony of missing him, there are fresh hurdles every day. But I'm committed to preserving everything we created together, not only for me, but also for his legacy. Our senior management team and I will be meeting tomorrow to talk about our expansion plans, which my husband was really looking forward to before he became ill. Even as we navigate these legal obstacles, it feels good to be pursuing his aspirations. I plan to prove him correct when he says that the best form of retaliation is success. Update 3. 2 weeks have passed since my in-laws challenged the will, and yesterday something really intriguing occurred. My brother-in-law, of all people, sent me a note. I was taken aback because we have absolutely nothing to discuss, and it seemed brave of him to get in touch with me considering what his parents are doing. We're absolutely not on terms where we can text each other casually, and we've never been very close. He texted me to ask if he could come over to my house. Something compelled me to give it a shot even though my first reaction was to decline and block his phone. I felt it had something to do with my in-laws, and I had a gut sense this might be significant. I also agreed to meet him because my parents would be home. He brought flowers and offered his condolences when he came, explaining that the circumstances with his parents had prevented him from expressing them appropriately during the burial. This wasn't the kind of behavior I expected, therefore I was surprised by how considerate it was. He had always struck me as being rather noisy and conceited in our past encounters at family get-togethers. Even more unexpectedly, he no longer had the same alcoholic odor as he had years before. His performance appeared to have been thoroughly cleaned up. He rambled on for a while before getting to the subject. He was there to inform me that his parents intended to discredit me and it would not be a pleasant experience. They were making up a story about how I was now rejecting their assertion that my husband had borrowed money from them to launch our company. They intended to spread their lies on social media as they were unable to legally pursue this angle due to the lack of a legally binding contract. I couldn't understand why they believed it would work because it was such a naive plan. But I was glad he came to alert me so I could take preventative action. Then he revealed something more intimate. He had been trying to improve himself over the last few years and had made multiple attempts to get in touch with us. But he lacked the bravery to do so after mistreating his brother for years. He knew it was too late, but now he was here to make amends for everything. I was totally unprepared when he actually began to cry. He was comforted by my father, who was there and prepared him a cup of tea to help him relax. I reassured him that everything would be all right and that I was certain his brother would have valued his gesture when he eventually left. He felt somewhat better as a result of this. In all honesty, I don't believe he was responsible for most of what transpired. Both of his children were let down by their parents. By treating him as the golden child, they believed they were doing him a favor, but in the end, they did neither of their kids any favors and instead spoiled him. I simply feel sorry for them both. They were entitled to better lives and better parents. My viewpoint on this whole situation has changed as a result of my brother-in-law's visit. Both boys were obviously impacted by the poisonous familial dynamics, albeit in different ways. His sibling is just now starting to see the harm their parents inflicted, while my husband found the strength to escape and start a new life. Update 4. After talking to my lawyer, I informed him of what my brother-in-law had told us. In order to use my in-laws' social media posts against them in court, we agreed to wait and see how things would develop. Our legal staff verified that having my brother-in-law testify against his parents would strengthen our case, and he even offered to do so if needed. My in-laws finally posted on social media a few days ago. I emailed them right away to warn them that we would take legal action and file a defamation case if they didn't remove it right away. They probably didn't anticipate such a prompt and stern reaction. When I told them that their own son was now on our side, it probably didn't boost their confidence. Almost instantly, they removed the message, but they insisted in their reply that they would take everything away from me. Their actions have now become nearly monotonous. I blocked their email address and wished them luck with their goals. They can do whatever they want, but now that my brother-in-law, their lone possible ally, is no longer on their side, they will need that luck. I am aware of the irony of the entire situation. They are now frantically striving to leverage family ties they themselves broke years ago in an attempt to obtain a share of the company they once wrote off as a silly dream. All of our legal records, their prior actions, and now the testimony of their own kid all point against them. Our attorneys are optimistic that this will shortly come to an end. They are aware that they are in a precarious position because they promptly took down their defamatory message after being threatened with legal action. Everyone concerned is realizing more and more that they have no case, either morally or legally. Knowing that my spouse was correct all along is what makes me the happiest, not the possibility of winning in court. He diligently prepared for the possibility that they would do something similar. Because of the legal measures he took and the video he left behind, he is still defending what we created together. Our company is still doing very well, and we are proceeding with the plans for growth that my husband was really enthusiastic about. Our clients have been understanding during this entire process, and the team is still very supportive. Honoring his legacy by carrying on with the dream we both shared is ultimately what counts. Now and then, my brother-in-law calls to see how I'm doing. Our family dynamics have changed in a little but significant way. It's never too late for people to own up to their mistakes and make an effort to improve, even though it's too late to save certain relationships. My husband has always had that belief, and I'm beginning to understand why. I am aware that I still have difficult days ahead of me, both personally and professionally, but I am also ready for whatever comes next. That was my husband's responsibility, and I plan to honor him by preserving and expanding everything we created together. Parents accused me of an affair with my brother-in-law, threw me out, and tried to destroy my career. The shocking truth uncovered. Over the past 6 years, I have established a prosperous career as a senior programmer at a large software business. My parents insist on family values and sticking together, so even though I make more than enough money to live on my own in a wonderful apartment, I've been living with them. Although they have always been domineering, I persuaded myself that it was simply their expression of affection. The environment in our home has always been complicated. This is also where my sister Emily, 32F, and her husband James, 34M reside. 3 years ago, James obtained a job close by, and our parents were overjoyed, so they moved back. With her ideal life, marriage, and grades, Emily has always been the golden child. The comparison began in our early years and has continued ever since. I love my sister, don't get me wrong, but sharing a home has been difficult. Since I work from home the majority of the time, my folks are always watching me. They keep an eye on who I speak to on video conversations, when I start work, and when I take breaks. They have persuaded themselves that this degree of engagement in my life is both required and typical. Even though my precise schedule is shown on the refrigerator, my mother frequently interrupts me in my home office during crucial meetings, saying she forgot I was working. Michael, my 29-year-old lover, lives across the nation. He has been tremendously supportive over our 3 years of long-distance dating. But he and our relationship were never accepted by my parents. They treat James as the son they never had and compare him to him all the time. They attack every aspect of Michael, including his choice to live on the West Coast, his work as a software engineer, ironically, the same field as myself, and even his attire when we video chat. James has always been cordial, not only as his wife's sibling but also as a little sister. We had a good relationship and I valued having someone who didn't criticize me all the time. He frequently defended me during family dinners when my parents began their routine comments about my life choices, as if he understood the burden I was under. Up until 2 weeks ago, everything was in control. With solemn faces, my parents summoned me into the living room. I was managing a group of developers on a significant software update during a pivotal project phase, so the timing couldn't have been worse. On my laptop, they said, they discovered offensive text that purportedly demonstrated my attempt to conduct an affair with James. I was caught completely off guard. The messages they displayed to me were obviously fake and completely out of context. Some appeared to be completely made up, while others were excerpts from business exchanges that had been altered to appear suggestive. I attempted to explain that I'm really in love with Michael and that James is like a brother to me, so I would never do anything like that. They wouldn't look, even when I promised to show them my actual message history. They refused to pay attention. I've always envied Emily's happiness, my mother said, sobbing. And she should have anticipated this because of my rebellious nature. I was a disgrace to the family, according to my enraged father. In the midst of the largest project of my career, they gave me a 24-hour notice to leave the house, a 24-hour notice to pack up my entire existence. I called my grandparents in tears and desperation. They have always been my refuge and our family's sane voice. They immediately believed me after I showed them the actual mails and gave them all the details. They took me in, provided me with housing, and helped me get through this ordeal. In order for me to continue working, my grandfather even assisted me in setting up a makeshift home office in their spare room. My father was furious to learn that I was staying with them. When I wasn't there, he actually came to their house and yelled at them for enabling me and undermining his authority. My father became even more irate when my grandfather refused to back down and stood up for me. Declaring he would never talk to them again, he stormed away. I was devastated to see my grandfather, who is normally composed, trembling with rage following that altercation. When my father began getting in touch with my place of employment, things got worse. He made outrageous charges about my inappropriate behavior and unstable mental state in emails he sent to my manager and the Human Resources Department. He even made an attempt to persuade them that I was giving competitors access to company secrets. Fortunately, my manager has been understanding and my work history speaks for itself. However, the strain is having an adverse effect. It has been embarrassing for me to have to explain these private matters to my staff. Then my granddad unexpectedly died yesterday. The agony is intolerable. He was more than simply my grandfather. He was also my confidant, my guardian, and the one who always had faith in me. The fact that my parents did not attend the funeral only makes it worse. They had left town. Later, when I was organizing my grandfather's funeral, I discovered through my cousin that they were actually on vacation, sharing photos from a beach resort on Facebook. Every happy picture they shared made my heart ache. Taking an emergency leave of absence from his job, Michael flew in to support me during this trying period. My parents appeared out of nowhere as soon as he got to my grandparents' house. As though Michael's presence was somehow improper, my father icily inquired as to why he was there. I eventually lost my temper at that point. I asked them who they believed had taken care of all the funeral planning, who had supported Grandma during her most trying time, who had stayed up late planning the ceremony, calling family, and interacting with the funeral home while they were taking selfies on the beach. Then, in an unsettling development, my father's entire personality altered. A disturbing peace took the place of the rage in his eyes. He became oddly calm and said he wanted to forgive me for what had happened with James and let the past be the past. He said he would let me stay with Grandma, but only if he got what was rightfully his. I understood exactly what he was after, therefore I was horrified by the abrupt change in his demeanor. My grandfather had been quietly successful with his investments over the last few years. My father desired his inheritance because he had accumulated a sizable nest egg. He had the gall to come and demand money after everything they had done to us and after leaving us during the funeral. He was unaware, however, that Grandpa had anticipated this. While organizing Grandpa's study the day following the death, we discovered a note hidden in his desk drawer. All it said was, "Call Bob." Bob, who had visited him multiple times over the years, was both his lawyer and an old friend. We found out that Grandpa had left everything to me when we got in touch with him. I now owned every cent of his savings. Grandma would always have a place to live, protected from anyone who would try to take it away from her, thanks to the house being signed off to her. My father broke his cool exterior when I told him this. As he accused me of controlling Grandpa and turning him against his own son, his face flushed with anger. He went on a tirade about how he deserved his parents' money and how he had always supported them. He was the one who had left his family to pursue his greed, so it was almost comical that he was accusing me of deception. In an attempt to persuade me, my mother said things like, "Didn't you try to take away your sister's happiness? You now wish for us to suffer as well." However, I refused to back down. Grandpa had made up his mind, and I was going to respect it. I clarified that Grandpa had only recognized where their priorities lay and that Bob, his attorney, could confirm all I said. I also said that there was no conspiracy. The tension in the air was oppressive as they departed. As I watched them leave, I felt both relief and grief. Relief that Grandpa had kept us safe even when he was not around, and sadness that my connection with my parents had reached a breaking point. I'm now concentrating on reconstructing my life and caring for Grandma. Throughout it all, Michael has been amazing, offering consolation and support when I needed it most. However, I can't help but wonder whether there was anything I could have done differently to avoid all of this suffering. Reddit. I realize this post is lengthy, but I had to get everything out. Everything has become more problematic because of the inheritance situation, and I'm worried that my parents might try something extreme. I would be grateful for any guidance on legal protection. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation? How did you respond to it? Update 1. Things took a turn for the worst a few days after my last update. Apparently not satisfied with simply pestering my workplace, my father has begun reaching out to our company's customers. I learned this when a representative from one of our largest clients pulled me aside in a virtual meeting to voice concerns about upsetting emails they had received about me. These emails were kindly forwarded by them. My father was methodically attempting to damage my work relationships after he somehow managed to obtain our client list. According to the emails, I was a volatile individual who was stealing business secrets and taking advantage of older family members for financial gain. The fact that he disclosed information regarding customer projects that he shouldn't have known about is very troubling. Now, since he works for a partner company, I'm wondering if James was giving him false information. The legal department of my business has been engaged. In addition to the possible harm to my reputation, they are taking this extremely seriously because my father's activities are endangering business partnerships. My parents received a cease and desist letter from them, which only appears to have made them more angry. My parents have responded by launching a full-scale campaign against me on social media. In order to disseminate their story, they have made numerous phony personas in addition to publishing on their own ones. The stories they are narrating are getting more complex. They now assert that I have been deliberately deceiving my grandfather for years and that I somehow planned out his whole investing strategy to suit my own interests. They are unaware that I discovered something startling while looking through more of Grandpa's documents. Classic Grandpa, always the meticulous planner, had a secret compartment in his desk drawer that held a USB drive and a pile of papers. Along with comprehensive documentation of what seems to be systematic tax fraud and money laundering through my father's real estate business, the USB drive included years' worth of email correspondence between him and multiple offshore accounts. I informed Grandpa's attorney, Bob, about these results right away. He wasn't surprised, which was an odd response. Grandpa had apparently been gathering this information for years, recording each dubious business transaction and suspicious activity. Even photos of meetings with well-known dishonest business people were included in the folder. Bob clarified that Grandpa had been assembling evidence but was holding off on taking action until the perfect time. A set of emails revealing that my father had been embezzling money from his own parents' accounts for years was the most upsetting finding. Probably thinking they wouldn't notice, he had managed to get access to their financial portfolio and had started taking little amounts out. Grandpa did notice though, and instead of confronting him right away, he decided to record everything. To examine all the evidence, Bob is currently collaborating with a group of forensic accountants. According to him, we have more than enough to possibly file criminal charges in addition to defending against any legal claims my parents might make. I have mixed feelings about this. While I desire justice, I still find it difficult to imagine my own father being charged with a crime. James's eagerness to return to my parents' house is further clarified by the evidence. He and my father exchange a number of emails about business prospects that seem eerily similar to Ponzi scams. I'm beginning to question whether the entire charge that I attempted to woo James was a preemptive move, meant to discredit me should I ever find out what they were doing. In the meantime, my mother has started calling my grandmother every day, alternating between threatening her and guilt-tripping her. The most recent strategy is asserting that my father's health is suffering due to the stress of my betrayal, and that I will be held accountable if anything were to happen to him. On Bob's recommendation, my grandmother, God bless her, has begun recording these calls. We've put in new cybersecurity procedures and placed security cameras throughout the house to keep ourselves safe. Bob suggested that I freeze my credit and assisted me in securing all of my accounts. When my parents see their intimidation strategies aren't working, he fears they may attempt a financial retaliation. My job has been suffering due to the stress, but in a surprising turn of events, this has improved my standing inside the organization. My manager has been tremendously supportive after seeing the proof of my father's harassment campaign. My application for a completely remote job has been expedited, so I won't ever have to worry about working from my parents' house again. Throughout it all, Michael has been my pillar of support. In a spare room at my grandmother's house, he has assisted me in setting up a safe home office with backup systems and secured communications. We're also talking seriously about his moving to a job nearer to me, but I'm concerned that this would make my parents even more of a target. To help me cope with everything, I've started going to a therapist. She is assisting me in realizing that I am not to blame for anything and that it is acceptable to feel both love and resentment for my parents. Processing the knowledge that the folks who raised you are not who you believe them to be is a difficult process. We are currently awaiting the completion of the forensic accountant's analysis. Within a few weeks, Bob continues, we should have a good picture of the scope of my father's financial crimes. I'm getting ready for whatever might happen next. My parents, who know me well, will not tolerate this. I appreciate your prior support, Reddit. I never thought my family's drama would reveal something so significant. Has anybody else learned that their parents committed financial crimes? How did you decide whether or not to report them? I'd really appreciate some advice on this. Update 2. Emily arrived at our home this morning without warning. As I prepared myself for another altercation, I saw a broken lady instead of rage. Her normally flawless appearance was unkempt, and her eyes were red and puffy. She broke down in tears before I could even inquire what was wrong. She sobbed and told what had transpired. James had been in Chicago on a purported work trip. Emily had flown out to his hotel in order to surprise him. She believed a romantic gesture may help ease her feelings of insecurity over their relationship. Rather, she entered his room and found him with another lady. It wasn't the worst part though. Emily insisted on seeing his phone during their heated argument. The whole story of our family was broken by what she discovered. The offensive messages that had caused me to be expelled. I never made them. To escape suspicion, James had kept one of his mistress's phone numbers under my name. Using my name as a front for at least 3 different women, he had been having several encounters. The most startling aspect of all was perhaps how our parents reacted when Emily told them this information. Rather than offering their heartbroken daughter assistance, they advised her to remain silent and try to resolve the situation with James. They cared less about Emily's happiness and more about keeping up appearances. To spare the family the shame of a divorce, they even advised her to forgive him. Then Emily found something much more unsettling. She discovered emails on James's laptop that showed he and our father had been involved in more than just family affairs. Together, they had established a number of shell corporations to conceal funds from investors and taxes. James has been directing contracts to these shells at exorbitant pricing by virtue of his position at his company. Accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands were found via the money trail. Emily discovered pictures of James having meetings with strangers, all of which were stored in a secret folder called insurance. James appears to have kept records of everything, most likely for protection against any attempts to expose him. Another realization dawned on me as Emily told me these specifics. Not only was the inheritance at the center of the recent harassment of my clients and workplace, but it was also a frantic attempt to discredit me before I might learn of their financial machinations. They thought I might eventually find their digital trail because I work in technology. My sister is currently residing at Grandma's house with us. She is working with Bob to document what she has discovered and has filed for divorce. In addition to harming James, the data she presented could have disastrous consequences for our father. She discovered certain transactions that were exactly in line with the documents Grandpa had been gathering. The irony of it all? For years, James had been living beyond his means, using the proceeds of these illicit operations to fund his numerous affairs. In addition to wanting to be near James's place of employment, they moved back in with our parents since they were having financial difficulties as a result of his extravagant spending on his covert life. Through all of this, Emily has shown incredible bravery. She has already discussed her findings with the FBI, who are especially curious about the financial fraud's global components. She has been informed by the investigators that this case may be worth millions of dollars. Our parents' approach has entirely altered. They are now attempting to argue that they were duped by James and were unaware of the true situation. However, the data points to a different conclusion. Documents we have discovered reveal that our father was the mastermind behind numerous of these plots, with James acting as the front man for his business. Emily is suffering from the stress of it all. For the first time in our adult lives, we have been spending evenings discussing things, and she has begun visiting her own therapist. She has repeatedly expressed regret for not trusting me and for allowing James and our parents to influence her. Since she was just as much a victim of their manipulation as I was, I have forgiven her. Grandma has been incredible during this entire ordeal. She said Emily needed the master bedroom more than anyone else at the moment, so she gave it to her. We've resumed having dinners as a family, just the 3 of us and Michael when he comes over. It's amazing how tragedy can unite people and forge new ties from the ashes of past ones. Our cooperation is complete, and the FBI inquiry is still going on. Our parents are still working to preserve their reputation in the neighborhood and have engaged pricey attorneys, but more people are discovering the truth every day. Our father's former business partners have begun to come out with their own accounts of dubious activities. Sometimes Reddit, the reality is more amazing than you might think. I'm finally with my sister again, and we're stronger together than we were before. We're getting ready for what is probably going to be a protracted court struggle, but at least we're doing it together as a family. A true family founded on support and truth rather than deceit and manipulation. Has anyone else experienced a similar situation where revealing a single family secret revealed a whole network of dishonesty? How did you handle the fallout? Update 3. The pace of progress has exceeded everyone's expectations. The FBI intervened last Friday morning when my father and James were enjoying their customary business breakfast at their preferred high-end eatery. I will never forget the expressions on their faces as they were carried out in handcuffs, directly in front of the city's most affluent business community. In an instant, their meticulously constructed image of prosperous business people fell apart. Teams attacked their offices, our parents' home and a number of storage units we were unaware existed as part of the coordinated raid that took place in numerous locations at once. They discovered proof of a 3-continent money laundering scheme, offshore account details, and decades worth of fake documents. Over $50 million is the preliminary estimate of the whole scam. However, that wasn't even the most fulfilling aspect. Do you recall the pictures James had saved for insurance? As it happens, he wasn't the only one who kept records. 3 of his ex-girlfriends came forward with pictures, emails, and text conversations dating back years. They had been silently constructing their own case and were all aware of one another. The finest aspect. For months they had been collaborating with the FBI. James's recent business travels were watched, and every transaction was recorded. As one might anticipate, my mother's response to the arrest was quite predictable. She made an effort to play the victim by saying she was unaware of their illicit actions. When the FBI disclosed that they had recordings of her actively engaging in money laundering through her charitable foundation, that story completely collapsed. All those lavish galas she held to raise money. Simple plots to wash up shady finances. There has been extensive media coverage. The story was carried by all local news channels and even by several national ones. Prominent businessmen and son-in-law arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. The headlines continued to appear. Overnight, my father's meticulously cultivated reputation as a community leader and benefactor was destroyed. The reaction from their social circle was fast and harsh. Those who once admired them at charity functions now act as though they had never met them. Their church requested that they resign from all committees, and the country club canceled their membership. In an effort to protect their own reputations, former business partners are going out of their way to assist the authorities. James's business quickly distanced itself from the situation. He was fired right away, and they are completely assisting with the investigation. As it seems, he had also been defrauding them by inflating contracts and keeping the difference for himself. His name has become poisonous in the sector, and his professional reputation has been utterly wrecked. What the forensic accountants at the FBI discovered made me laugh aloud. Grandpa left that property in the trust in Florida. It was more than simply a dilapidated house, it held the secret to their whole scheme. Grandpa had purchased it especially to serve as evidence after learning that it was being used as a front for money laundering. He was aware that the property inquiry would reveal everything if they attempted to challenge the will. Even from the afterlife, he played them like a chess master. James and my father both agreed to plea bargains last week. The punishment is severe. My father will serve 15 years in federal prison, James will serve 12 years, and all assets related to their crimes will be forfeited. For the remainder of their lives, they will both be making restitution. Next month, my mother will be sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison for her involvement in the money laundering conspiracy. After all of this, Emily is stronger than ever. She started her own business with the settlement, which was the little money left over after asset forfeiture, once the divorce was finalized. We've never been closer since she moved into a comfortable apartment close to Grandma's house. Our parents worked very hard to sever the sister link, but it has since become indestructible. There was more karma to come. Do you recall how my parents attempted to ruin my reputation in the workplace? The board of my organization was so pleased with my handling of the matter that they elevated me to the position of Director of Security Operations. I now oversee a group of people that work to stop the exact type of scam that James and my father perpetrated. Last month, Michael relocated here, and we recently purchased a home a few blocks away from Grandma. By the way, she's doing fantastically. She used her experience to help others by starting a support group for families impacted by financial fraud. What about the valuable social standing of my mother? When I last heard from her, her old pals were openly avoiding her while she was shopping at the bargain grocery store. Her friends have made it apparent that she is no longer welcome in their group, and her expensive jewelry and clothing have all been confiscated. According to Reddit, justice isn't always served without flawless karma. Despite going through a lot, my family has emerged stronger, closer and wiser. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who helped me along the way. And to everyone who has experienced similar betrayals in their family, never give up. When the truth finally surfaces, it's a magnificent moment. Parents used my wedding fund for my twins' lavish celebration. So I finally cut them off, but now they're back needing my help. I, 28F, must explain everything here. I've had this rivalry with my twin sister Emily for as long as I can remember. In my case, it wasn't just between us, but I suppose that's normal for siblings. Without even recognizing it, my parents were deliberately pressuring us into it. I was just there, and they've always treated Emily like she's something unique. I'll tell you why this occurred. Emily is precisely 12 minutes my senior. You heard correctly, 12 minutes. It seems that's all it takes to be my family's golden child. Emily was their miracle baby, the one who could do no wrong, from the day we were born. I wasn't a horrible kid or anything, but she always received the credit for whatever I did. My first recollection of this partiality dates back to kindergarten. Both of us participated in the school play. I played the main part in Little Red Riding Hood and Emily got 2 lines as a flower. Emily started crying on stage during the concert after forgetting her lines. My parents missed my entire performance as they hurried to console her right away. Later that evening, they didn't even recognize my accomplishment, all they could speak about was Emily's bravery for trying. For the duration of primary school, this pattern persisted. Emily would be told, "Oh honey, you tried your best," if she received a C on an exam, but I would hardly be acknowledged if I received consecutive A's. I recall working on a science fair project about renewable energy for weeks in 4th grade. I conducted research, constructed models, and even spoke with regional environmental specialists. When I handed my parents the blue ribbon for winning first place, they hardly gave it a glance. Emily had a difficult day during volleyball practice, but that's still wonderful. Can we discuss this at a later time? After that, I stopped showing them my honors. The worst thing was that they made no effort to conceal their partiality. My dad used to make jokes at family get-togethers about how Emily was their firstborn and, despite the fact that we are twins, those 12 minutes somehow made her the older sister. "Emily is our responsible one, she looks after her younger sister," he would remark. I was standing there, listening to them reduce me to Emily's shadow and nothing more. Things started to have a significant psychological impact on me in middle school. I became quite driven to prove myself. I joined as many clubs as I could, including the student council, the debate team, and the math club. I was motivated to excel at everything, so I studied late into the night. Emily, on the other hand, coasted through, doing very little but somehow receiving more attention and recognition. One particular incident in particular sticks out. I was selected to compete in the state-level mathematics competition on behalf of our school in the 8th grade. I prepared for months, frequently studying until 2 or 3 in the morning. Emily had a recreational soccer match on the same day as the competition. In addition to not showing up to help, my parents didn't even inquire about how I was doing. All they could speak about when I brought home the trophy for second place was how Emily needed to be cheered up because her team had lost their game. With greater stakes, high school was more of the same. I was still participating in as many extracurricular activities as I could, taking all of my AP classes, and keeping my GPA at 4.0. Emily spent much of her time at parties and barely kept up a C average. She was still the fun and social one though, and I was criticized for being too competitive and serious. The discrepancy was brought to light during our senior year. Because of my academic accomplishments, I was named valedictorian, accepted on a full scholarship to a top university, and even had an article in the local newspaper. Emily enrolled at community college after barely graduating. However, my parents bemoaned Emily's failure to get into her first choice school for the whole of our graduation celebration, which was meant to be for the two of us. In their address, they made no mention of my accomplishments. The pivotal moment occurred while attending college. I continued to keep perfect grades while working part-time to support myself while attending a prestigious institution to study computer science. I would return home from every break with the hope that something had changed and that perhaps my parents had begun to see my value. Instead, it was Emily this, and Emily that. Somehow her decision to leave community college after just one semester was interpreted as a sign that she was brave enough to follow her own path. Then, in my junior year, came Thanksgiving break. Everything changed when my uncle, who had always had a slightly excessive love for alcohol, made a mistake. He disclosed that my parents hadn't even intended to have twins while he was thinking back on my mom's pregnancy. They were devastated to learn they were expecting 2 children when they had only intended to have 1. My dad, being the docile person he is, simply shrugged and said, "We'll figure it out." My mom had been concerned about how they would manage 2 babies. However, their method of figuring it out was to basically choose a favorite and focus all of their energy on her, which was of course, Emily, their cherished firstborn. In their minds, those pivotal 12 minutes were the difference. After years of wondering why they didn't care about my accomplishments, everything suddenly fell into perspective when my uncle confessed this to me when we were seated at the dinner table. It all made perfect sense. I was the afterthought and the unexpected addition, not the child they had hoped for. Something in me altered after that realization. I gave up trying to please them. I put all of my attention into creating my own life instead. I gave my all to my coursework and internships, wanting to succeed for myself, not for them. I received several job offers from prestigious tech businesses by the time I graduated. I took a job at a promising startup as a software engineer, and after 3 years, I was promoted to senior developer. Emily, meanwhile, was organizing this lavish wedding after meeting a wealthy man at a pub and having a brief flirtation. Naturally, my folks were ecstatic. They couldn't even recall the name of the company I worked for, yet they spent hours on the phone with her talking about the specifics of the wedding. My company was getting ready for an initial public offering, IPO, and my stock options were worth more than Emily's fiancé made in a year. The irony was that I was actually doing very well. They never inquired about my professional background. It was the wedding fund situation that ultimately crushed my heart. The only one who had ever treated us fairly was our grandmother. She left each of us a sizable sum of money before she died, especially for our upcoming weddings. She had been very explicit that we were to share the money evenly. She told me in private that she was aware of my parents' treatment of me and that this was her method of making sure I would have something that was exclusively mine. Naturally, though, my parents were unable to honor her last desires. Emily wanted this ridiculously lavish wedding, complete with a celebrity photographer, a fancy outfit, and several locations. They chose to take from my share of the inheritance rather than urging her to cut back or asking her wealthy fiancé to contribute more. They didn't even tell me. They didn't ask. It wasn't until months after the wedding that my inebriated uncle, yes, the same one, spoke about it at another family get-together. They responded angrily when I confronted them about it. "Oh honey," my mother remarked, dismissively waving her hand. "We were going to tell you eventually. When we can, we'll reimburse you." Even worse was my father's reply. "Well, Emily needed it more. She's the conventional one getting married, and since you're so preoccupied with your work, it's unlikely that you'll even desire a lavish wedding." I felt nothing as I stood in their kitchen staring at these folks who were meant to be my parents. This deep emptiness, without any sadness or rage. They were unable to even comprehend the wrongness of what they had done. They believed that since it was for Emily, it was totally acceptable to take my inheritance without my consent. Emily had always been the focus. I returned to my flat that evening and gave my life a lot of thought. I came to see that Emily had eclipsed or completely disregarded every significant turning point, accomplishment, and proud moment. My graduation from high school. They were too preoccupied in comforting Emily over her grades. Due to Emily's difficulties at community college, my college scholarship was hardly recognized. Emily was preparing for her wedding, so she disregarded my first promotion. I did something I should have done years ago when I opened my laptop. I emailed them and said, "I am aware of the wedding fund. I am aware that, without consulting me, you used my inheritance to pay for Emily's wedding. The way you've treated me throughout my life is more important than the money. You never made an effort to conceal the reality that I was never the daughter you desired. I'm done attempting to win your affection and acceptance. I'm over being the kid you didn't want. Do not get in touch with me again unless it is to repay my money, please." I felt a tremendous weight lift off my shoulders as I pushed send, banned their numbers, and deleted them from all social media. I didn't have to worry about trying to meet Emily's standards or gaining acceptance that I would never receive for the first time in my life. It has been a life-changing year. I gave my job and personal development my all attention. My stock options are now worth more than Emily's whole wedding expenses because our company's initial public offering, IPO, was a success. I started therapy to address my childhood trauma, purchased my own home in a desirable area of the city, and formed sincere friendships with individuals who genuinely respect me for who I am. Occasionally, Emily makes an effort to connect with distant family members or mutual friends. She will write things like, "Family should stick together," or "You're still my sister." But as she saw our parents discount my accomplishments throughout the years, where was this sense of family? When she joyfully received my inheritance for her wedding, where was that? She shared our parents' complicity in everything. Some relatives have attempted to place the blame on me by claiming that I'm being too severe, that blood is thicker than water, and other such things. However, these are the same individuals who silently observed my parents' years-long favoritism of Emily. They remained silent after seeing my treatment. They are no longer able to express an opinion. It's interesting because cutting them off has made me realize who my true family is. My therapist, who is helping me see that none of this was my fault. My coworkers, who applaud my accomplishments, and my college best friend, who assisted me in moving into my new home. The ones that genuinely care about me are these. I have been offered a role as team lead at the firm I work for, which recently launched a new office in a different state. I'm making a decision for the first time in my life without considering how it will compare to Emily or what my parents will say, and it's a great opportunity. It feels amazing to be living my life for myself. Am I the jerk for cutting them off entirely? Reddit? I often question whether I'm being overly dramatic, but every time I consider the possibility of getting back in touch with them, I reflect back on all the years I spent feeling inadequate, and I know I made the correct decision. It's going to get even more complicated now, though, and I need your honest thoughts on what I should do next. Update 1. 2 weeks ago, everything changed drastically. My phone began ringing with several calls from my uncle when I was in the middle of a team meeting. My initial reaction was to ignore it because family calls always indicate turmoil, but I decided to answer it because there was something unique about receiving several calls in quick succession. He began, trembling a little, "Hey, it's Uncle Greg." I knew right away that something was amiss. He is typically the type of guy that remains positive even in the face of adversity. I need to discuss your parents with you. I felt sick to my stomach. I knew this couldn't be good news because I hadn't heard from them in 2 years. What's happening? Trying to speak steadily, I asked. They were involved in an accident. A rather poor one. They are in the medical facility. He paused, and I heard him inhaling deeply. Their car was struck by a truck that ran a red light. Your dad is in critical condition, and your mom has several fractures. They have spent a few days in the hospital. Days. I said it again, raising my voice. And until now, no one had the idea to tell me. He said, they wanted me to let you know, in a calmer tone. I believe, they want to see you, I believe. That's not all though. Their insurance is having issues. There was, of course. He went on to tell me that 6 months prior, my parents had allowed their health insurance to lapse. They had been having financial difficulties due to credit card debt and poor investments. They were far from being discharged from the hospital, and the medical bills were already mounting. What about Emily? I knew the answer when I asked. Uncle Greg let out a sigh. She said she couldn't assist with the bills when she visited once, immediately following the accident. She didn't want to ask her husband for money so soon after their honeymoon, for some reason. She is occupied with her stepchildren, her new family. That made me giggle. Emily is typical, always coming up with an excuse. Emily was too proud to approach her wealthy husband for assistance with our parents' medical expenditures, even though she had no trouble taking my fortune for her wedding. I sat in my office for a while after I hung up with Uncle Greg, gazing out the window at the skyline of the city. I didn't miss the irony. Now that my stock options had vested and I had more than enough money saved to pay for their medical expenses, I was truly in a position to assist them. Did I want to, though? I was unable to concentrate on anything else for the following few days. I jumped every time my phone buzzed, anticipating a call regarding their status. I couldn't stop picturing them in hospital beds, presumably wondering if I would ever arrive. Since they were my parents, I felt bad for even thinking about not helping. The years of favoritism, the stolen fortune, and the way they only contacted me now because they required something from me were all brought back to me though. Simply put, this was about money. Not about re-establishing contact or making amends. 3 days after Uncle Greg called, Emily texted me. I am aware that you are performing well at work. Parents are in dire need of assistance. This is your opportunity to act morally. My opportunity to act morally? When she was using my inheritance to pay for her wedding, where was this moral compass? Where had she been all those years when she saw our parents brush off my accomplishments? My parents finally called themselves after a week of internal conflict. Although my mother's speech was weak and obviously influenced by painkillers, her deceptive methods remained same. As if the past 2 years of silence hadn't occurred, she began, "Sweetheart, we're in a really tough situation here. According to the specialists, the expenses might reach $200,000, not including rehabilitation. We acknowledge our shortcomings as parents, but..." I interrupted her. "No, you aren't, and you never will be. You haven't gotten in touch with me in 2 years, and the only reason is that you need money." My dad's voice said, "That's not fair." He was probably on speaker. "Your parents are us. Family supports family." That statement, "family helps family," set me off. Anger that had been bottled up for years came to the surface. "Family helps family." I said it again. When you used my inheritance to pay for Emily's wedding, where was that feeling? When you missed my college graduation, where were you? Where did you neglect every significant event in my life because you were too preoccupied with showing your admiration for Emily? After a brief period of silence, my mother began to cry. Those recognizable, cunning tears I had heard so many times when she wanted to make me feel bad. She said, "How can you be so cruel? The hospital is where we are. Your dad may require surgery. Will you truly desert us at this point?" I inhaled deeply before uttering the words I had been wishing to say for years. "Yes, in fact. Yes, I am. All my life you emotionally abandoned me. You just thought of me as Emily's shadow and your fallback option. Now that Emily is refusing to assist, you turn to me. No, I will no longer be your last option. Starting with, 'But we're family,' my father said." "No," I cut in. "We're not. Since you determined that Emily was the only child deserving of your love, we have not been family. I'm finished. Never get in touch with me again." After hanging up, I blocked their numbers once more. I then texted Emily one last time, saying, "They're also your parents. Try it yourself." The days that followed were extremely difficult. I would always have these moments where I would doubt my choice. Was I being too severe? Despite all, should I still assist them? But every time those thoughts surfaced, I was reminded of how they had treated me throughout my life and how they had only ever contacted me when they wanted something. Yesterday, Uncle Greg gave another call. He attempted to guilt-trip me by claiming that my parents required physical therapy and surgery since their health was deteriorating. He said they might lose everything and that they were discussing remortgaging their home. The problem is that I have no responsibility for their financial difficulties. They made their decisions. They decided to give Emily preference. They decided to squander the money I left them. They decided to allow their insurance to expire. They are currently dealing with the fallout from their decisions. Some may accuse me of being heartless. Perhaps I am. But I've been striving to be good enough and win their love my entire life, and I'm done. I am no longer the fallback option. When Emily refuses to take charge, I'm done being the one who has to make all the repairs. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself, even though I realize this makes me seem callous. My mental well-being is more important to me than their guilt trips. My financial stability is more important to me than their shoddy preparation. Reddit. I know I previously questioned whether I was the jerk for cutting them off, but I need to know if I'm the jerk for not helping them pay their medical costs. This one even seems unclear to my therapist. While I feel bad about it, I also think that this is just another instance of them only wanting me around when they need me. And believe me, the narrative doesn't end here. The situation is going to become considerably more intricate. Update 2. My life took yet another drastic change 3 days ago. I was enjoying a peaceful evening at home after a very demanding workday during which we had completed preparations for the opening of our new office. My doorbell rang at precisely 8:07 p.m. when I was studying some project paperwork, enjoying a glass of pricey red wine, a minor luxury I now permit myself, and some classical music playing softly in the background. I hadn't ordered anything and most of my friends normally text before coming over, so I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze, staring through the peephole. Emily was standing there looking like the affluent trophy wife she had become, complete with a fashionable gown, flawless makeup, and a $15,000 Hermes Birkin purse in her hand. I was aware of the irony. That bag alone could have paid for a sizable amount of our parents' medical expenses. I briefly thought about acting as though I wasn't home, but throughout the previous few weeks, I had undergone a transformation. I was no longer the person who squirmed around Emily. She had intimidated me for too long, and I had allowed her to win. No more. I opened the door with my cool, controlled and slightly dismissive corporate boardroom demeanor. Leaning against the doorframe, I remarked, "Well, if it isn't my dear sister. What brings you to my humble abode?" Without waiting for an invitation, she swept by me and entered my apartment. Emily's usual behavior. Her gaze swept across my living area, taking in the original artwork on the walls, the contemporary furnishings, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the city. I could picture her mentally listing everything, most likely contrasting it with her suburban McMansion. She said, "Nice place," in a tone that suggested the exact opposite. Very cozy. She used the word cozy with that special emphasis that affluent people give to something they think is beneath them. "Stop wasting your time, Emily. Why have you come here?" She turned to me, adjusting her scarf, an anxious habit from childhood. "Mom and Dad are deteriorating. Mom's physical treatment isn't covered by their payment plan, and Dad needs emergency surgery for internal bleeding they missed at first. Unless they can provide proof of payment, the hospital threatens to suspend treatment. They are discussing selling the house." I saw her knuckles whiten as she gripped her fancy purse more tightly. Emily in her classic form. She was clearly preparing for something. And that's my problem because... I arched an eyebrow, purposefully imitating her patronizing tone from our early years. "Because you can help them," she said, her immaculate exterior beginning to falter. "I am aware that your business went public. I checked the pricing of the stocks. I conducted research. You've got the cash." That made me giggle. The sound, which was perhaps rougher than I intended, reverberated off the walls of my flat. "Oh, you have been monitoring me? How intriguing. Before using my inheritance to pay for your wedding, did you do this much research? Or prior to your own refusal to assist them? In all this, where is your wealthy husband?" Emily's face turned red, another vivid memory from my early years. Her dramatic outbursts, which always ended with our parents comforting her, were always preceded by that flush when we were little. "That's different," she stammered as her poise continued to falter. "I now have a new family. I have obligations. Consider stepchildren. We each have our own financial plans, James and I. When a family situation arises, I can't just throw money at it." "Can't just what?" With a strong voice, I interrupted her. Can't you simply assist your parents, who have given you everything? Who paid for your wedding with my inheritance? Who prioritizes you the most? Who didn't attend my college graduation to assist you with your apartment move? Those parents. She waved her hand dismissively and said, "That's ancient history." But I saw that she stepped back. "This is roughly right now. You're being selfish, and they need help." Her use of the word selfish was the last straw. A lifetime of repressed rage and bitterness abruptly solidified into a chilly, unambiguous goal. I went silently to my home office, picked up my laptop and a few papers off my desk, and then went back to the living room. "Emily, would you like to discuss money? Let's have a conversation." I rotated the screen of my portfolio dashboard in her direction. "Look at these figures. My stock options are these. I'll explain it to you in words you can comprehend. This is more valuable than James, your husband, will be in 3 years. That home of which you're so proud. If I wanted to, I could pay cash for it tomorrow." As she gazed at the numbers, her face turned white instead of crimson. I went on, bringing up papers such as my investment portfolio, my pay stubs, and the most recent offers I had gotten from rival businesses. But you're a tech worker." For the first time I could recall, she stumbled, "You're just a programmer." Her voice was small. "Emily, I'm now a senior development director. I was making something for myself while you and your wealthy husband were playing home. I also did it without treading on anyone else, unlike you." I clicked firmly to shut down my laptop. Without using any of my resources, I could assist mom and dad by covering their medical expenses. However, I won't. She murmured, "You're being cruel." But I could see that she realized that her younger sister had outwitted her. "No, it is terrible to stand by and do nothing while your sister is ignored her entire life. Without asking, cruel is stealing her inheritance. Cruel only shows up at her door when you're in need." I approached the door and pulled it open. "Are we finished here? Don't return?" Clutching her pricey purse like a shield, she stood there. She made one final attempt to say, "You'll regret this," but her voice lacked the assurance it usually possessed. "When they lose everything. My only regret is that I didn't cut you all off sooner. Emily, goodbye." I poured myself another glass of wine after she left, a $200 bottle I had been putting away for a special occasion, and this one felt like it, and then I went out to my balcony. In front of me, the city lights were a tapestry of freedom and opportunity. I felt totally free for the first time in my life. No more living in Emily's shadow, no more feeling guilty, no more looking for approval. My phone was inundated with notifications the following morning. Apparently, Emily had spent the night phoning every member of the family she could get through to tell them how I had changed, how prosperity had made me callous and uncaring, and how I was leaving the family when they needed me most. Uncle Greg wrote me a very long mail on karma and family responsibilities. In response, I shared a comprehensive folder with the family group chat. It included scanned copies of my inheritance documents, bank statements that revealed how my money was used for Emily's wedding, text messages from Emily stating that she would not assist with the medical bills despite her affluent lifestyle, and a breakdown of my current net worth that showed exactly how much I could contribute if I so desired. After that, the family conversation became very silent. Our cousin Angela was the only one to reply, "Holy, you actually did it, didn't you? In fact, you were successful on your own." I worked on my future plans over the course of the following few days. In another state, I accepted the promotion, which came with a bigger package of stock options and a substantial rise. The real estate agent believes my apartment will sell for a lot more than I'm asking for in this neighborhood, so I put it up for sale. I've already begun searching for real estate in my new city. This time, perhaps a penthouse. Emily sent me one last text last night, which said, "Mom's crying every night because of you." I commented, "She had years to cry about how she treated me," and included a screenshot of my inheritance paperwork in my response. Her tears are no longer effective. After that, I blocked her number and all of my other family contacts. Closing the last chapter of a book I should have finished years ago was how it felt. You have been amazing during this journey, Reddit. Your encouragement made it clear to me that I wasn't alone in my feelings and that it's acceptable to put oneself above harmful family members. Your remarks served as a constant reminder of my decision-making process whenever I had second thoughts. Recently, I received a message questioning if achieving financial success was worth sacrificing my family. The truth is, though, that I didn't lose any. Folks who never treated me like family in the first place were folks I broke free from. My achievement just gave me the courage to refuse their treatment. It didn't change who I am. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who told me similar stories, gave me advice, or just confirmed how I felt. When I most needed strength, you gave it to me. I will begin looking for a home in my new city next week. A new life, a new career, and a new home. For the first time, I'm looking forward to the future without being constrained by obligations to my family. AITA? To some, perhaps. However, I've come to the crucial realization that sometimes being branded an asshole by toxic individuals is a sign that you're finally advocating for yourself. Reddit, thank you. I was able to discover my value and voice thanks to you. My family treated me unfairly, favoring my twin. In the end, she used lies and manipulation to steal my fiancé. Life has a tendency of catching you off guard, don't you think? I, 35F, never imagined that I would be here, sharing my heart on Reddit at the age of 35. The idea that my fiancé, the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with, married my estranged twin sister after just a week of getting to know her, still baffles me. What brought me here? Everything's a lengthy and agonizing tale, but I must let everything out. I suppose I ought to begin at the beginning. To put it mildly, my twin sister and I have had a complex family dynamic for as long as I can remember. My sister was obviously the star child from a young age. You would assume that parents would treat twins equally, wouldn't they? False. In our family, my sister always came first and I came second. When we were young, it began with modest things. My sister always had the first choice when our parents bought us clothes or toys. She would always make the first choice, leaving me with anything she didn't like, even if the products were identical but different in color. I would be lectured about selfishness, how the gifts were the same anyway, and how acting entitled would make me never get far in life if I ever objected. The preference increased in intensity as we aged. I'll admit that I resented my sister for enjoying the attention and pampering. We were never close, and as we started middle school, our distance from one another only grew. She began hanging out with the cool kids, and distanced herself from our group of friends. I could at least have my buddies to myself and find some quiet at school, so in a way this was better for me. The distance between my sister and I continued to widen throughout middle and high school. By the time we graduated, our social networks and areas of interest had entirely changed. Because I would be interacting with her less, this worked for me. Although she continued to be cruel, particularly at school when she tried to appear cool to her peers, I had grown accustomed to her conduct by that point and was not particularly bothered by it. Things between us became so bad at the conclusion of high school that there was no turning back. I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish with my life, so I put a lot of effort into my college applications. In addition, I wanted to stay up with my pals, who were all striving for top schools. Since I wasn't interested in finding out, I never inquired about my sister's essay preparation. However, for someone who wasn't ready or didn't seem to know what she wanted to do, she exuded far too much confidence in her admissions. I was devastated to learn that she was accepted to my ideal school, but I was not. Even though I was sad, I felt uneasy. I discovered, just in time, that she had stolen my work and turned it in as her own after doing some research. I was enraged. As usual, my parents would have told me to suck it up and that nothing could be done now, so I didn't want to inform them. I had had enough of being polite and being trampled. I made the decision to go nuclear. I sent the university an email outlining her plagiarism and proving that the material was actually mine. Additionally, I informed them of the circumstances at home and asked that they use caution when responding to her. They did, however, reply and put her on a blacklist after discovering that she had plagiarized during the application process. She sat stunned when she received the email and gave me such a hateful look that I thought I would pass out. However, she was unable to tell her parents anything. That she stole my essay. What could she have said? I was more than happy that she was finally receiving the credit she deserved, even though I knew I had put her in a difficult situation. I'll confess that it was stressful and, to me at least, a little funny. She was aware of my actions and I was aware of hers. She was unable to go because it would require her to acknowledge that she had stolen my work, and I didn't want to go to my parents for a resolution. Unfortunately for her, this injustice devastated her parents. They insisted that there was no plagiarism involved, and were resolved to bring it up with the university. It became messy at this point. When my parents emailed the institution, they received a thorough response regarding her application and the work, my work, from which she had stolen. I mistakenly thought that after they witnessed what their beloved daughter had done to me, they would finally accept her for who she truly was, and perhaps, just possibly, I would start to play a significant role in the family. The exact reverse was what took place. I spent days being scolded for intentionally destroying my sister's life and profession. They chose someone to harass as soon as they discovered that I was the one who had reported the plagiarism. She stole my work, but that didn't matter. The fact that she was at fault didn't matter. The fact that she prevented me from attending my ideal school didn't matter. The fact that I had exposed her without their knowledge was all that mattered. They called me all kinds of names and stated that talking to them about it would have been the right thing to do, after which they would have come up with a solution. I informed them that letting her leave without any consequences would have been their only option, and I would have been told to accept it and apply somewhere else. My home was a wreck and nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. It was now obvious that I would always be the fall guy and that my sister would never be held accountable for anything she did. I was just waiting for college, but the following few months were terrible. I knew that as soon as I left the house, I would never return. In any case, there was nothing to return to, so I did just that. I instantly stopped communicating with my sister and my parents after leaving for college. After her little incident, she was dead to me, and I had no intention of ever seeing her again. Going to college was a welcome adjustment. I worked hard, had a good life and made good friends. Determining to succeed on my own without assistance from my family, I immersed myself into my studies and extracurricular activities. I met around this period, and we remained friends for a few years. We had the same group of friends, even though he was my senior in college. He asked me to be his girlfriend just before he graduated, and I accepted. Since he was one of my best friends and I enjoyed spending time with him, I thought a relationship would be the natural next step. He informed me that he had been crushing on me for years and had been trying to have the guts to ask me out until I said yes. Sincerely, I thought this was cute and informed him that even if he had asked me sooner, I would have said yes. For what it's worth, our connection was good. We knew each other well because we were already close friends. A certain amount of ease and candor was present and it just happened. I also told him about my family's whole predicament. I clarified that nothing could ever force me to speak to my sister again and that I had very little contact with either of my parents. I requested that he honor that. His family is picture perfect, therefore he found it ridiculous that a family could be so dysfunctional. He is the eldest of 4 siblings, all of whom are supportive and close, and his parents are deeply in love. He has never experienced my ordeal. I liked and appreciated the familial dynamic he came from, and I respected that. The affection they had for one another was really sweet. I couldn't help but feel a little envious because I had never had it. But because he couldn't imagine dysfunctional families, I made it plain to him that he should never expect me to return to my family and attempt to make things right. I trusted him since he appeared fine with it. I had no idea that this would turn out to be my worst life decision. I concentrated on developing my career after college. I was resolved to show myself, and if I'm being completely honest, my family, that I could be successful without their help or connections. I put myself into my work and worked my way up the corporate ladder. I had a prosperous marketing career, a great downtown apartment and a circle of close friends who had become my adopted family by the time I was in my early 30s. We both decided to take things slowly, but Em and I kept dating. Neither of us felt the need to rush into marriage because we were both focused on our careers. I felt like I had at last found someone who understood and supported me, and the arrangement was comfortable. Em proposed to me 2 years ago when I was 33. Yes, of course, I said. By that point we had been dating for about 8 years, and I was certain that he was the man I wanted to live my entire life with. His family welcomed me with wide arms when he first introduced me to them. Even though it wasn't biological, I felt like I had a family at last. I formed separate ties with each of his siblings, who were very hospitable, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Even before I married him, I felt like I was a member of the family. The next natural step was marriage, and I was quite content with my life and my relationship. Planning for the wedding, honeymoon, and other details took up the whole year prior to our planned wedding last year. It was a difficult period for our relationship as well as stressful since I recognized then that we had differences and that it would take work to overcome them. Nevertheless, we voluntarily persevered. While deciding on the guest list, we got into one of our most heated arguments. He wanted to invite a large number of people, including his immediate relatives, some uncles, aunts, his siblings' partners, and others, but I wanted a small, private wedding. However, I didn't have any family members I wanted to invite. I informed him that I genuinely didn't want my family near me on my wedding day and that I would only be inviting my friends. He initially agreed, but I could tell he was hesitant. When I asked him if there was an issue, he said that there wasn't, so I dropped it. Nevertheless, he approached me a week later and advised me to invite my family since there would be no wedding without a family present. I gave him a wide-eyed look and informed him that I had always made it plain that my family was not involved in my life. There was no reason to be upset about my parents' absence because they were unaware that I was engaged and that the bride and groom were the only 2 guests required for a wedding. He refused to give up. He said that any arguments I had with them could be put aside for a single day and that his intention was only to invite them to the wedding, not to establish a romantic relationship or extend forgiveness. Any invitation, I informed him, would imply that I wanted to patch things up, and I didn't want to do that. I should have left him there. Looking back, I could tell that he had chosen to hurl this at me even though he claimed to understand my reality and my upbringing, which I had always been open about. But in love, I was a fool. I nearly stopped talking to him after our many arguments, but I knew deep down that we had to come to an agreement. He finally explained to me why he insisted on inviting my family after much back and forth. He claimed that he didn't want his relatives to believe that he was getting married to a woman who didn't get along well with her family. He believed that my parents' absence would reflect negatively on his family, which is highly traditional and has always lived by the family first motto. That was not what he wanted for me. I initially believed his way of thinking to be considerate and caring, but I soon came to see how flawed it was. Since his parents and siblings already knew that I didn't get along with mine, he was more concerned about the impression his family would get, particularly his extended family, than he was about the psychological effects on me. I should have seen that the show was more important to him than his wife. I paid the price for not doing so. I finally decided to phone my folks after much back and forth, but there was where I crossed the boundary. I informed him that while I would have them there, my sister and no other family members would be present. My family would not be permitted to speak, and there would be no father-daughter dance. He had to put himself in my shoes, and that was the only need for inviting them. Fortunately, he consented, and he was aware that he had little other option. Additionally, I cautioned him against reaching out to people on his own. I would only call and extend an invitation when I thought the time was appropriate. I knew they would make something up and convince my sister to go if I told them too soon, and I couldn't agree to that. To be honest, I also hoped that they might not be able to make it if I told them too late. In this manner, even though I would be technically correct, I would still get my way. I believe M had a suspicion, but even if he had, he remained silent. So that was that. 6 weeks before the wedding, I told my parents, and they assured me that the whole family will undoubtedly be present to support me on this wonderful day. I interrupted them immediately and informed them that my sister would not be attending my wedding in any way. I would take them out myself if they attempted to be cunning and brought her anyhow, even if just the two of them were invited. They attempted to object, claiming that it was the ideal moment for the family to get back together, that I should stop being a baby, that I had gotten my revenge, and that I should be content. Before the wedding, I informed them that this was the only way I would be contacting them. They were aware of the location and the time, and they could attend if they so desired. But I wouldn't think twice about taking the required action if they tried anything. I hung up the phone after that. I was completely mistaken to believe that was a strong enough warning to stop them from making any plans. I should have anticipated that my sister would show up there and cause chaos. She did create a mess, but it was far more extensive than I had anticipated. I need to get this off my chest. Yet as I sit here typing this, I can feel the hurt and rage rising within me once more. What happened next was a betrayal so profound and agonizing that it rocked the foundations of the life I had worked so hard to create, and I needed to tell someone, anyone, what happened next. In my upcoming update, I'll continue this. I need some time to gather my thoughts because writing it all at once hurts too much. I appreciate you reading this far. I had no idea that I would be telling my tale in this way, but here we are. I would be grateful to hear your opinions and advice. Right now I feel completely lost. Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and I'm still in shock about everything that transpired. We appreciate all of your encouraging messages and remarks. I never thought that strangers on the internet would be so generous. Where did I leave off then? Yes, the dreaded family invitation and the wedding planning. In case you're not convinced, things have gotten worse. My parents came into town via plane the week before the wedding. They asked if M and I could meet at their hotel so they could give me something. M persuaded me to go despite my reservations, suggesting that it might be a peace offering. He assured me that he would accompany me and that we would depart as soon as difficulty appeared. I felt sick to my stomach when we got to the motel. I sensed a problem as soon as we entered their room. My twin sister was seated on the bed, grinning smugly, and there she was. Just a few days before my wedding, my parents had ambushed us in the hopes of forcing a family reunion. I went cold. The old emotions of hurt, betrayal, and rage returned with a vengeance. M put his hand on my back when he could tell I was upset, but it didn't help much. With her arms extended as though the past 15 years of separation didn't matter, my mother took a stand. We thought it was time to move on from the past, she remarked, her voice brimming with fake tenderness. Your sister wants to talk to you about something. My sister got up and began what seemed like a prepared statement before I could respond. "I apologize for what happened with the college application, and I know I hurt you," she started. "I've regretted that ever since I was foolish and young." I gave a sour laugh. "Young and dim-witted? We weren't 8, we were 18. You were fully aware of what you were doing." My father added in a firm tone. "Now, let's avoid bringing up previous points of contention. As a family, we are here to move forward." I looked to M, expecting him to support me and remind them of our wedding deal, but he was silent and had a serious look on his face. I trembled as I murmured, "May we go now?" After he paused, he said something that completely shocked me. "Perhaps we ought to listen to them. After all, they are trying." I turned and left the room without saying another word. Trying to make sense of what had happened, I headed to the hotel bar and ordered a heavy drink. Hours went by. My phone was vibrating, and I chose to ignore the never-ending barrage of missed calls and messages. When I eventually returned to our flat, it was already midnight. M was pacing the living room while she waited to wake up. Hours passed while we argued. M insisted that I should at least attempt to make amends because family was vital. How he could be so oblivious to the suffering they had inflicted upon me was beyond me. We were clearly at a standstill as the night went on. "I need some time," I responded at last. "I'll be spending a few days with a friend. I must think." The days that followed were a haze. I ignored me and my family's calls and texts and stayed with my best pal. I needed time to reflect and determine my true desires. The more I considered it, the more I saw how deeply M's actions had damaged my faith in him. I eventually consented to meet with M 3 days prior to the wedding. A calm cafe where we had gone on our first date years prior served as a neutral setting for our meeting. I didn't miss the irony. M appeared awful. He appeared to have aged years in a matter of days, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I was still angry and hurt, but I also felt bad for putting him through this. He started, "I'm sorry," as soon as I took a seat. "I ought not to have pressured you to make amends with your relatives. I was mistaken." Hours passed while we recapped past exchanges and upsetting experiences. Ultimately, we reached a decision that felt necessary but shattered my heart. M whispered, "I think we need to postpone the wedding. We clearly have some issues we need to work through." With a mixture of relief and regret, I nodded. "I think that's for the best." We came away from the cafe with a rough plan. We would separate for a month, avoid communication, and give our desires some serious thought. We would then get together once more to determine whether to proceed with the wedding or, well, we didn't want to consider the other option. I began making calls the following day. I informed our vendors that the wedding would have to be postponed indefinitely. Although we lost some deposits, most were understanding. I communicated with our visitors by sending out a general email outlining the circumstances in ambiguous language. Then there was quiet. Like an unending desert, the month without communication stretched out in front of me. To distract myself from the uncertainties of my relationship, I immersed myself into my work and picked up new interests. I initially incessantly checked my phone, half hoping, partly expecting to find a message from M. However, I noticed that I was checking less and less as the days stretched into weeks. During our connection, I began to rediscover aspects of myself that I had previously allowed to slip away. I started painting again, got back in touch with old acquaintances, and even went to the beach for a weekend by myself. I experienced a mixture of dread and excitement as the month's end drew near. Another part of me, which was getting stronger every day, questioned if perhaps this separation was for the best, but I still wanted to see him again to see if we could salvage what we had. I received a call from an unknown number the day before our scheduled meeting. I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years when I responded. The shaky voice of my sister. "Please, don't get married to Emu." Suddenly, my world began to shift on its axis once more. However, that is a tale for a future update. I apologize for leaving you waiting, but I need time to think about what transpired next. I appreciate everyone listening and helping me get through this nightmare. I will return soon with additional details about the story. Update 2. My previous update was almost 11 months ago. I'm sorry for the extended silence, but I needed time to take it all in. I appreciate your support and patience, everyone. My estranged sister had just given me a startling phone call urging me not to marry M when I left off. From there, however, things only became more difficult. I met M the following day as scheduled after that enigmatic call. I knew something was seriously wrong the moment I laid eyes on him. He had black circles under his eyes and appeared gaunt. I was about to respond when he suddenly exclaimed, "I made a terrible mistake." My heart fell. My world was shattered by his next statement. With his voice hardly audible above a whisper, he admitted, I married your sister. I briefly believed I had misheard him. How was it possible for him to wed my sister? Only a month has passed since our separation. I experienced a wave of nausea as the reality set in. M then told me an absurd story that sounded like the storyline of a poorly written soap opera. My family apparently persuaded M to listen to them after I left that day. They told him stories about my early years, portraying my sister as the victim and myself as the troublemaker. What's the worst? He took them at face value. I felt offended and bewildered. Your family seemed so sincere and I thought maybe I didn't have the full picture. M attempted to clarify. I made a foolish choice. My sister and parents had hatched a complex scheme. To avoid being made fun of by his family, they proposed that M wed my sister for the ceremony. After the commotion subsided, they could have the marriage dissolved or divorced. Despite the absurdity of the proposition, M had somehow consented while he was confused and being manipulated. Stunned into stillness, I sat. I was so deeply and profoundly betrayed that I was at a loss for words to describe how angry and heartbroken I was. I got up at last. I never want to see you again, I stated in a remarkably composed tone. You, my sister, my parents. You're all dead to me now. The weeks that followed were a jumble of suffering, rage, and incredulity. Unable to face the world, I took a leave of absence from my job. Despite the support of my friends, I was distraught. During this depressing time, M's mother called me out of the blue. Something compelled me to answer the phone even though I didn't want to at first. Please, she said in a tearful voice. I must see you. You must be aware of something. I agreed to meet her against my better judgment. At a little park close to my place, we first met. Her eyes were red from sobbing, and she looked terrible. She disclosed the whole scope of what had happened. M had been duped by my family, who had played on his fears and fed him tales about my background. They had persuaded him that I was unstable and that I had fabricated tales about my family in the past. But why would he believe them over me? Still having trouble understanding, I asked. Tragically, she shook her head. He had a susceptible condition. Your relatives took advantage of the fact that your abrupt departure had unsettled him. She clarified that M's family had opposed the hurried union with my sister. Despite their attempts to dissuade him, M had carried out the plan while in a confused and manipulated state. And now? I inquired, fearing the response. Your sister won't get a divorce from him. By threatening to demand a large amount of alimony if he attempts to leave her, she has been dragging the marriage along. However, the disclosures did not end there. She informed me that my sister had told them the truth about everything a few days prior while intoxicated. She acknowledged that all they had told him about me was false and that they had trapped him. She even came clean about the essay that had been taken all those years ago. Her words, M has been devastated since then. He'd like to speak with you. He claims that he made the most significant error of his life and is unsure of how he would ever be able to apologize. Perhaps you can speak and decide what to do next, he hopes. With my head spinning from all this new knowledge, I gazed at her. I felt somewhat vindicated because the truth had finally surfaced. However, a greater portion of me was just worn out. Well, I answered in a stern tone. Thank you for sharing all of this with me, but M and I are no longer a we. He decided. Regardless of their marital status, he is now my sister's husband. I refuse to interfere or assist him in getting out of this situation. When I said this, she sobbed and begged me to change my mind, but I refused. Telling her, my decision is final. I've moved on from that phase of my life. I'm unable to reopen those wounds. She texted me several times over the course of the following few days, urging me to speak with M, but I didn't reply. All of this was too much for me to handle anymore. I thought a lot about everything that had happened, including the life I had nearly committed to, the man I thought I knew who had deceived me so profoundly, and the family that had never really welcomed me. And I came to the crucial realization that I was stronger than everything. At that moment, I decided to use my experience as a springboard rather than a setback. I had been granted another opportunity to live my life as I had always desired, free from the burdens of my past. With fresh energy, I pushed myself back into my work. In order to resolve my trust difficulties and the residual pain from my family's betrayal, I began therapy. I became closer to my pals and was even more grateful for the family I had chosen for myself. And what do you know, things improved. It wasn't always easy, and on some days I felt like the hurt and rage would get the better of me, but I gradually began to recover. I can state with confidence that I'm in a better place than I've ever been after 10 months. I've taken up new interests, gotten promoted at work, and even resumed dating, albeit informally and much more cautiously. Ever since that day in the park with M's mother, I haven't heard from M or my family. I'm thankful they're no longer in my life, but occasionally I wonder what happened to them. They are responsible for the repercussions of their own acts. I want all of you out there who may be experiencing anything similar to know that things get better. You are stronger than you realize, even though it may not feel like it right now. Never allow a friend, family member, or romantic partner to make you feel less valuable than you actually are. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. This is going to be my last update on the matter. This chapter of my life is coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to many more joyful ones. Cheers to fresh starts, selected families, and the inner strength we discover when we need it most. Revealing my brother's darkest secrets sparked an explosive Mother's Day confrontation, leading my family to cut ties with him. Years of repressed feelings and unresolved tensions exploded over the Mother's Day breakfast. For the sake of peace, our family continued to strive to maintain civility even though my brother Sam had always treated me badly. I was usually the silent one, wanting to be his buddy in spite of everything, and forgiving him for things I shouldn't have. For a long time I let him treat me whatever he pleased since I had no idea what a true sibling relationship should feel like when I was growing up. I've matured emotionally over the years and currently reside with my parents. I became resentful of Sam after realizing how poorly he had treated me, and I eventually stopped talking to him. Mother's Day followed. Sam and his fiancée Leah joined us for brunch. I went to help my mom even though I had a migraine because I was afraid Sam would abruptly cancel, as he frequently does. His only remarks were patronizing, but I hardly spoke to him. We went outdoors after lunch, and the heat was making my migraine worse. When I asked Sam to go, he became irate and told me that no one had requested me to come in the first place. The anxiety increased even after my mother swiftly defended me. I finally had enough. After years of frustration, I turned around and faced him. Sam had already acknowledged that he wasn't pleased with Leah, claiming that she made him miserable, but he was scared of being by himself, I reminded him. I practically reminded him of how he had wounded me. He once grabbed me by the neck and held me against a wall until I passed out when I attempted to stop him from driving while intoxicated. He has never shown regret for that night, the PTSD it created, or the grief he inflicted. Even the fact that he didn't come see me in the hospital following my injury or during my 3-month recuperation at home was disregarded by him. It was quite painful. His defense was feeble when he did reply. He asserted that my college residence was funded by our parents, as though that in some way excused his actions. They also covered him, I reminded him. Puffing up his chest, avoiding responsibility and challenging anyone to challenge him were all hallmarks of Sam. I made it plain that he was not a member of my family at that point and instructed him not to get in touch with me ever again. As they conversed, my dad gently led me back to the car. I had said everything I needed to say, so I didn't listen. My mom cut off Leah's attempt to clarify that Sam had denied me permission to stay with them due to their 2 enormous dogs. I never intended to bring my own dog Pebbles, but Sam had lied and said I did. Sam vowed that as long as I was around, he would never return to the house. Mom promptly put an end to my brother Sam's recent attempt to have my parents expel me. She said that it's entirely his fault and that I'm far higher on the family hierarchy than he is. Mom was first conflicted. As a mother, it was difficult for her to think about severing Sam's relationship even though she knew he was totally at fault. However, Mom acknowledged that she was incensed when I detailed all the horrible things he had done to me and other family members. Assuming that sibling arguments were common and that I was always the one who was fine, she even expressed regret for not disciplining him more when we were younger. Sam refused, saying he wasn't ready to deal with her yet, even though she texted him that an apology would be greatly appreciated. My parents informed me that they would not go to Sam's wedding if I was not invited. They desired that he be held accountable for his deeds. To be honest, the idea behind the wedding is that I wouldn't attend even if I were invited. I revealed to Mom that Sam had actually embezzled almost $800 from Dad over the years, which was more than we initially believed. I also disclosed that he had harmed me physically and mentally by having sex in both my parents and my beds. Despite all, Sam's success at work is solely due to Dad's efforts, and on Father's Day, he was unable to send a text. He became upset when Mom reminded him, saying it ruined his day. That really got us going. We became aware of how badly Sam had fouled things up as we vented. Both Sam and Leah, his fiancée, don't have many friends. She is angry that their grandmother won't give Leah's child all of her attention, so she doesn't talk to either her mother or her sister. Given that I enjoy organizing things, they most likely expected me to assist in planning their wedding, baby shower and other events. Now that Sam would make me dog sit without my consent, I don't know who will assist her. Years ago, Leah made offensive remarks regarding babysitting, saying that mom wouldn't want strangers watching her kids. This further strained her relationship with her mother. They probably thought I would act as the compassionate sister and offer assistance, but that isn't the case. Sam used to treat me like his therapist, but he didn't show any sympathy after my 14-year-old dog died. In the meantime, he revealed that he is afraid for the day she passes away since he wouldn't know what to do with one of his senior dogs. Well, he is no longer able to rely on me. Now that Leah is aware of Sam's actual feelings for her, I assume the engagement is tense. Leah is slowly coming to the realization that Sam has also lied to her about me. To be honest, I have no idea or interest in how it is going for them. Both of them are blocked. We even wager that Sam believes I'll give in and get him a present for his birthday without him having to say sorry. He will be rudely awakened. Dad was outraged and said, "I can't even trust my own family," after learning how much money Sam had stolen. For me, that was the tipping moment. I used to be amenable to apologizing and mending our friendship, but I'm done now. When Leah showed us the sonogram, I felt sick to my stomach. With the hope that Sam would change his mind, my family and I had dreaded the day when he would be married and have a child. In particular, Leah struggles to care for herself. Unfortunately, they both damaged their relationships with everyone who could have been of assistance to them. In light of everything that has transpired, my mom and I made an effort to make Dad's birthday last week extra special. Every year, Dad's place of employment hosts a family appreciation day at a nearby amusement park. Sam also works there, but unless we go together, he normally doesn't pay attention to these activities. On his birthday, Sam surprisingly texted Dad to ask if they wanted to do something over the weekend. Dad said Sam would see him closer to the date because he had been working on projects and was taking a week off around his birthday. Sam texted once again on Friday as the weekend drew near, wondering if they might get together. Dad had a little shift on Sunday, and Saturday was the day for family appreciation. Dad didn't want to go alone, so he told Sam they were busy, even though my mom had informed him he could go without her if he so desired. Even if they had been free, I sincerely hoped they wouldn't consent to meet him, so I was relieved when Mom told me about it. "Maybe we'll get back to him about his birthday around Christmas," Mom joked after reassuring me. Even though he lives only 10 minutes away, Sam is notoriously awful at commemorating occasions and providing gifts, and he frequently sends cards much after the customary time. For example, what did he anticipate happening? After everything, I needed that laugh. As an aside, a commenter brought up the fact that Sam's chokehold was truly a felony, that is, the strangulation of a kid. I was struck with that realization. I never really thought it was a crime because I was so accustomed to his physical outbursts. On that one, he totally avoided the repercussions. Although I believe that too much time has gone, I still want to see whether there is anything I can do legally about it. In any case, hearing about the text conversation with Sam made me chuckle and helped to diffuse the tension. "If Sam is ready to deal with me yet?" a humorous commenter inquired. The irony is that he most likely isn't aware that Saturday was actually scheduled. Since he and Dad share a workplace, Dad might easily learn about Sam's schedule, including that Sunday duty. In any case, Sam will believe that my parents are ignoring him on my behalf and come to the realization that they are not forgiving of him so easily. He might genuinely comprehend the repercussions for the first time. Recently, I had another unsettling thought. What does Sam's violent conduct signify for my future niece or nephew if it hasn't changed? Even after 15 years, the trauma still affects me. Sam has a history of losing control under pressure, getting lethargic, and drinking more. I'm also concerned for their child because Leah can hardly take care of herself. Sam probably wants me to be sympathetic and take on the role of caregiver. But even if I wanted to, I honestly don't know if I could handle that legally. Given how much time has gone by, anxiety makes me question whether the authorities would even consider me seriously. We showed up unannounced, which actually means we came twice a year, both times when we had car issues nearby, as Leah has complained about. Her family, meanwhile, frequently visits without any problems. Leah isn't very important to any of us anyway. Not knowing if our dad would survive, she once pulled Sam and me from his hospital bed so we could go to her mom's weekly dinner. She used it as a weapon when Sam actually yelled at her on the way back, accusing him of not giving a damn about her family. Mom finally threw Sam out after he failed to discipline his dog after it hurt her, asking him to get his act together. Although I know my parents truly love me, I find it frustrating that they haven't held him accountable in the past. They were fostering children at the time to help pay for Sam's education tuition and to make ends meet, so they would have lost their license if they had reported him. By that point, Sam was only home during breaks, and fortunately, there were no other children there. Regarding childcare, I no longer have any sympathy for Sam or Leah. Before allowing them to abuse their child, or, worse, if Sam ever throws his child on me without asking, I would contact CPS. I no longer consider them family. Let's move on to the next family matter, my brother's wedding. Because of his controlling mother-in-law, there were no children. At this point, Leo, my kid, won't interact with him in any way. My family has always been close-knit and has supported me in raising Leo. I am a 46-year-old single father. Leo's favorite person in the past was my brother Jack. Because Jack and Mary had flexible work hours when Leo was younger, they frequently took him to the zoo, aquarium, or even camping. As my son got older, he began to share my brother's passions for video games, photography, and music. Leo informed me he wanted to follow in his uncle's footsteps when he was 9 years old. All of this is to suggest that they were very close. My brother told me last year that he and Mary, his girlfriend, were getting married. When I questioned Jack and his girlfriend about it, they told me it was all Karen's idea, my stepsister's mother, because I knew they didn't think marriage was a good idea. Karen was paying for the wedding, so Jack and Mary didn't give a damn, so they let her organize everything, including the location, the food, the music, etc. Karen made the decision to organize a destination wedding in an upscale hotel. Last July my son and I received the invitation that was sent to us both. If I so desired, I even had a +1. I attempted to book our hotel stay as soon as the wedding website launched. Since the link wasn't working and I didn't want to take the chance of not getting a room, I had to call the hotel. The confirmation email stated room for 2 adults, but I didn't give it much thought because I thought the hotel personnel were having trouble communicating in English. At about the same time, I also purchased our airline tickets. Less than a month before the wedding, in January, my stepsister called me in tears. Karen had chosen the wrong location. It turns out that the resort was exclusively for adults and that children were not permitted. At the time, my kid was 13. They informed me that the entire resort was child-free, so Leo wouldn't even be permitted to attend the ceremony or reception when I asked if we might stay at another hotel. Disappointed, I promised my stepsister that I would discuss it with my kid. She insisted that she and Jack wanted to tell him face to face, even though I knew how thrilled he was about his uncle's wedding. To be honest, my son was heartbroken. When he was informed that he would not be allowed to go, he broke down in tears. He begged them to move the wedding and even offered to donate all of his savings. After half an hour, my brother became irate and told Leo that the day wasn't about him and that he was being self-centered. After a while, Leo apologized and retired to his room. My son ceased communicating with my brother after the wedding. Leo would disregard any messages Jack sent him unless they were important to me. For instance, he couldn't get through to me, so he would only respond if Jack asked him to tell me something. Leo would answer simple queries at family get-togethers, such as "Can you pass the salt?" or "Help grandma with the plates," but he would turn away from Jack and Mary if they attempted to strike up a conversation or inquire about school. To make up for the wedding, Jack and Mary promised to treat Leo to a memorable spring break getaway a month after the wedding. After turning down the invitation, my son informed me that he didn't want to accompany them. I knew he had always wanted to go there, so it was devastating, but he refused to back down. Leo had a similar incident on his birthday. After I told him that I was going to throw him a party, he urged me not to invite his aunt and uncle. He claimed that if they didn't want him on their special day, he didn't want them on his. I attempted to persuade him by reminding him that they were family and that they were sincerely sorry. When I informed my brother that he was not invited, he was devastated. But this past weekend at my mom's place, things reached a breaking point. The topic of Leo's plans for college came up. Leo told my mother that he was no longer interested in going to the same university as Jack and that he had decided to pursue another course of study. "Why would I want to be like your uncle?" my son said in response to my mother's statement that "I thought you wanted to be like your uncle." I stepped in and informed Leo that although he didn't need to be so impolite, the harm had already been done. After hearing what he had to say, my brother and stepsister quickly fled. My brother texted me last night to call me a jerk for letting Leo harbor resentment. He even implied that I wasn't doing anything to improve their connection by accusing me of being envious of it. I explained to him that these were the results of his behavior and that he was solely responsible for letting his future mother-in-law organize the wedding when she obviously didn't take my child into account. He ended the call. My mother and some relatives believe that in order for us to all move on, I should make my kid forgive my brother, saying that it was only a small error and that there was no malice. However, I don't believe I ought to. My kid was obviously harmed, and he should only be given the opportunity to move past his hurt and forgive them when he is ready. Recent update. For a while, we will be avoiding family gatherings. My brother promised to accept Leo's boundaries after we spoke. In addition, he clarified the actual events, and most importantly, Leo is currently doing considerably better. Here is a longer update for those who are interested. I told my mother that until things calmed down and, more importantly, until Leo felt at ease again, we would no longer be going to family events. I believe she finally realized how much Leo had been hurting, even if she was rightfully upset. My mother surprised me by telling me that she was adamant that Leo forgive Jack since he had fallen into a depression. I clarified that pressuring Leo to forgive could end in driving him farther away. When I informed my sister that we would no longer be attending family events, she expressed sadness as well, but she claimed to understand. To ensure that the kids could still spend time together, she recommended that we establish our own weekly ritual. For the past few weeks, that's what we've been doing. Leo spends time at her place one week, then my nieces and nephews visit me the next. Leo seems content with this arrangement, and it appears to be working so far. The fact that he is not under parental pressure to engage with his uncle, in my opinion, is beneficial. I texted my brother the weekend after my post, requesting a meeting and conversation. Mary wasn't there because I told him I wanted to talk to him alone. Jack instantly expressed regret for his actions and words, expressing his regret for both. He supported my presumption that his frequent arguments with Mary had caused him worry. He also said that the arguments had gotten so heated that he had thought about getting a divorce. I may come out as harsh, but I informed him that I only wanted the truth about what had happened and didn't care about that. According to Jack, he was unaware of the child-free location until November. But Mary had known for a long time, perhaps all of it, as many of you suspected. It seems that this all began when Jack and Mary took Leo to the beach a few years ago. My son unintentionally called Jack Dad when they were playing, but he swiftly corrected himself. According to Jack, it was a minor innocuous error, similar to when a toddler unintentionally addresses a teacher as mom. Leo felt ashamed, but Jack dismissed it with a laugh. The problem was that Leo had been overheard by Jack's stepmother, Karen, and her husband Phil, who had accompanied them on that trip. Karen lost out when they got back from their vacation, saying she was triggered by a random kid calling Jack Dad, especially since she knew Mary couldn't have kids. Karen became very poisonous and aggressive toward Mary, demanding among other things, that Leo not be welcomed over when she visited, despite Mary's attempts to clarify that it was only a misunderstanding. At first, Jack and Mary only intended to elope without a celebration when they made the decision to get married. However, Mary was tricked by Karen into allowing her to organize the ideal wedding for her only daughter. Mary gave in because she wanted to maintain harmony and was worn out after years of emotional manipulation. Karen deliberately selected the child-free location and took control of the wedding preparations. Mary found out after the place was reserved, but Karen played the victim when she attempted to protest. According to Mary, she tried to work out a deal with the resort, requesting an exception so the kids could stay at a separate hotel and yet attend the ceremony and reception, but the manager was adamant about the rules. Mary became more and more nervous as the wedding date drew near, and in November she told Jack the truth. My brother claims that Mary's emotional outburst was caused by her mother's persistent bullying and manipulation. And she felt terrible for allowing things to come to this point. Jack informed me that rather than excluding Leo and my sister's kids from the wedding, he would have intervened and called it off if he had known sooner. Canceling was not an option though, as many individuals had already reserved their hotel rooms and flights by that point. Ultimately, I informed my brother that none of this justified their actions, particularly Mary's. A woman in her 40s was arguing with a child. When all Leo wanted to do was offer the $2,000 he had saved so he could attend Jack's special day, she screamed at him and called him selfish. I told Jack that he had disappointed Leo, who admired him and thought of him as a hero. Jack had demonstrated to Leo that Jack valued him more than he did. I also informed him that I would be going low contact myself and that I would continue to support Leo's decision to stop communicating with him. I told Jack that he had already apologized enough when he begged for another chance to apologize to Leo. He had no choice except to wait and see if my kid would ever accept his apology. Despite his seeming sadness, Jack assured me that he would honor our requests and give us some space and time. Regarding my son, I expressed regret for not advocating for him earlier and for making him attend weekly family meetings. I informed him that he was free to choose how he wanted to manage that aspect of the family in the future. Although he was hesitant to stop going, I assured him that I would always be there for him and that I wouldn't be offended by his choice. Leo recommended that we spend more time together, just the two of us, rather than attending weekly family events, which pleased me. He suggested that we partake in some of the things he and my brother used to do. We attended a vintage car exhibition last week, and we're going to see *Wicked* the following week. It sounds like fun, But I'm not a theatrical person. I also expressed my concern that he had stopped doing the activities he loved and advised him not to give them up because he had a disagreement with a loved one. I clarified that he may still enjoy things alone or with a companion. He acknowledged that he had stopped doing such things out of spite for Jack, even though he truly wanted to. I chose to buy him some games that he had been looking forward to but had refunded following the altercation with my brother as an early Christmas present. Using his PC and my PS5, he even persuaded me to play one of his Final Fantasy games online. Since the last Final Fantasy the game I played was still in 2D. I'll admit that I have no idea what I'm doing, but he seems to like seeing me fail. We would appreciate any advice you may have. For my birthday, we ultimately agreed to travel to his ideal location. I was a little depressed that I wouldn't be celebrating my brother's birthday for the first time in nearly 50 years, but all that matters is that I had my son. Leo is less anxious and happier as a result of family matters. In relation to family, it appears that they are at last honoring our limits, which is a relief. All I can hope for is that my brother can improve his marriage. Even though I don't like what they did, I do want him to be content. My parents always favored my adopted sister, even pushing me to combine my store opening with her graduation. This time, I got my revenge. I'm a 24-year-old male who grew up in what appeared to be a normal suburban middle-class family, but my parents' actions have caused me chronic suffering all of my life. Their entire reputation in our neighborhood was based on the fact that they were these wonderful people who, in all honesty, loved their adoptive daughter even more than their biological son. Few people are fully aware of the impact this had on me. My adoptive sister Emma, who was 3 at the time, was brought home by my parents when I was 6. Everything in my life changed on that day. I was ecstatic when my parents sat me down in our living room and discussed the possibility of adopting a sibling. Most afternoons I waited for my parents to get home from work by playing games in our backyard by myself. The children in the area were either much older or younger than me, and I had no siblings with whom to play. It seemed like the ideal answer to have a sister with whom I could share my toys and hang out during those long days. It was just what I had hoped for when Emma initially came. During those peaceful afternoons at home, we played together, had snacks, and I at last had someone to chat to. But over time, little shifts in my family's dynamics continued to accumulate. Emma became the center of my parents' attention, and they made all of their decisions with her best interests in mind. If Emma wasn't in the mood, they would postpone weekend family activities, modify dinner arrangements to suit her tastes and rearrange their schedules so that they could attend all of Emma's school functions while missing mine. I began to feel marginalized in my own household, as if my parents were losing interest in me. There is more to this narrative than just sibling rivalry, even though I am aware that some may assume I am just jealous. There was a noticeable difference between Emma's and my parents' approaches to childcare. My mom quit her 8-year accounting job to become a full-time mother within a week after Emma's arrival. In contrast to when I was born, Mom returned to work as soon as her maternity leave ended, putting me in the care of different people. I spent most of my time at my grandparents' little apartment or with whatever teenage babysitter they could afford that month because my parents were constantly worried about money back then and worked extra and weekend shifts. The babysitting situation was anything from perfect. Instead of truly watching me, these sitters, who were mostly high school students looking for additional money, often saw their position as an opportunity to hang out with their partners. As they sat in the living room, texting or chatting on their phones, I would spend hours by myself in my room. Sometimes, when they thought I was sleeping, their boyfriends would sneak in through the garage or climb through our rear window. My parents would terminate the present sitter after I repeatedly told them about these instances, then hire a new one who behaved similarly. During years, this cycle persisted, and I felt that no one genuinely cared about my welfare during the majority of my early years. I believed that everything would improve when Emma arrived. I took my responsibilities as a big brother seriously, even though I was only 6. I gave her access to all of my toys and even assisted her in learning the letters, as much as a 6-year-old could. It was good to have my mom at home all the time. I believed we would finally be able to do everything I saw other children doing with their mothers, such as going to the park or baking cookies. Rather, as the big brother, my mom expected me to be mature and self-sufficient while spending all of her time and energy on Emma, treating her like a princess. When my parents changed the plans for my birthday, things really started to get tricky. Emma's true birth date was unknown to the orphanage and she had been discovered abandoned at a shopping mall. After conducting a number of tests, including dental work, developmental evaluations, and physical examinations, the doctors determined that she was around 3 years old at the time of her discovery. My parents decided that Emma should share my birthday rather than keeping the date she was given at the orphanage or picking any other day of the year. They portrayed this concept as though it were a unique privilege for me. I began to notice small differences every year, but those early combined birthday celebrations were tolerable. Even though I continued to get gifts and eat some cake, Emma started to dominate the gatherings. Family, friends, and relatives would show up with twice as many presents for her, gushing about how wonderful it was that we celebrated together and hardly seeing me. Emma's backstory appeared to captivate everyone, who treated her more like a queen than a mere child. As everyone gathered around Emma to listen to her recount the same adoption tale they had heard dozens of times before, I sat there, silently opening my gifts, trying not to feel invisible at my own birthday celebration. I still find it annoying that my parents had Emma share my birthday. She was already officially given a date by the orphanage, the day she was discovered. We could have chosen any day that may have been Emma's special day, such as my aunt's birthday in September or my grandparents' anniversary in March. However, my parents purposely picked my birth date because they thought it would help Emma feel more a part of the family. The one special day of the year when they are the focus of attention for the majority of children is their birthday. However, my parents used this innocent youthful delight as just another reminder that Emma's needs came first. They concluded this choice with sentimental platitudes about sharing and family ties, which prevented a 6-year-old from expressing dissatisfaction without feeling self-centered. The only person who appeared to realize something was off was my uncle. During that first joint party, he drew me away to ask if I truly felt comfortable with everything. By the time I was 10, I no longer celebrated birthdays but loathed them. Emma was in charge of every step of our combined celebrations, from picking princess themes that made me feel uncomfortable at my own party to selecting a cake that I didn't even enjoy. The issue with the guest list was especially unfair because I was only allowed to invite 5 of my friends, but Emma would bring 20 or more from her different activities to our home. Because of this rule, I had to pick my friends carefully every year, which occasionally strained my bonds with those who were unable to go. After I was unable to invite my best buddy to my 11th birthday, we stopped communicating for weeks. When I wanted to invite a 6th buddy one year, the inequity of these parties became even more apparent. My parents denied the request right away, claiming that our home could already host as many people as possible. Emma's pals and their mothers, who needed to supervise their daughters at all times, were able to find space nonetheless. My parents used their go-to justification that girls require extra supervision to brush off my worries when I brought up the fact that my pals arrived alone. Emma's friends and their mothers, meanwhile, occupied our entire living room and treated me like a guest at what should have been my birthday. On multiple occasions, I plucked up the nerve to propose holding separate parties. Every time I tried, my parents would cut me off with prepared answers about Emma's challenging past. They would bring up her terrible beginning in life for the 100th time, utterly disregarding the fact that they were making a difficult present for me by consistently denying my feelings, or they would tell me that she didn't know her true birthday, as if that somehow justified taking over mine. I always felt bad about bringing up the topic in these chats, as if I were being selfish for wanting a day to myself. I eventually gave up arguing over my birthday. In what had become Emma's special day, featuring her brother, I learned to put on a smile and play my part. The pain persisted. It simply became a recurring emotion on each birthday. Emma unwrapped twice as many presents than I did during these parties, and I would sit silently in the corner and try to look joyful while family members swooned over her and hardly acknowledged me. Finding my passion for making things with my hands was the one silver lining in all of this. Making a pencil holder out of an empty cereal box one dull afternoon was the beginning. Before long, I was turning a variety of everyday objects into works of art. Bins of gathered materials, such as broken jewelry, plastic bottles, and old newspapers, anything I could repurpose, filled our garage, which became my go-to spot. I watched do-it-yourself videos for hours on end, learning new ways to make everything from elaborate jewelry to gorgeous wall hangings. My works, which were solely mine and which Emma was unable to share or take over, gradually filled my room. By my early 20s, what began as a therapeutic pastime in my teens had developed into a lucrative internet business. I worked a day job at a local coffee shop and spent many hours improving product images, writing descriptions, and running my online store. Social media users began taking notice of my handcrafted goods, and soon I had loyal clients from all across the nation. With cabinets brimming with supplies, and a special shipping station in what should have been my dining room, my tiny apartment was transformed into a workshop. My funds ultimately allowed me to create my own physical store after 3 years of meticulous financial planning, working overtime, and reinvesting nearly every penny of earnings. I discovered the ideal location. A former boutique with exposed brick walls and lots of windows in a bustling shopping area. 2 months ago I signed the lease, and in my free time, I designed exhibits, planned the store layout, and planned a grand opening event. This was meant to be my chance to shine, to prove to everyone that the boy who sat in the corner on his birthdays had accomplished something meaningful. I even engaged a local photographer to capture the entire occasion. My folks reacted in a predictable way when I told them about the store opening. After 5 minutes or so of their seeming excitement, my mother revealed that Emma was graduating from college at the same time. They suggested that we combine the opening party with Emma's graduation celebration before I had even finished outlining my preparations. My dad nodded as though this was the most sensible notion ever, and my mom remarked, "Think about it, we can invite everyone once instead of making them come to 2 separate events." The irony of attempting to combine my milestone with Emma's once more went unnoticed by them. I declined right away, stating that I wanted my accomplishment to be the main focus of this celebration. When I resisted, my parents seemed surprised, as if they didn't understand why I wouldn't want to share this moment with them. Using their tried and true guilt-tripping strategies of making things easy for everyone, they persisted in pressuring me, accusing me of being selfish and challenging. They used the same expressions they had used when I was a child. "It's only one day, and why can't you be more understanding?" But this time was different. I had worked alone for years to establish this business, staying up late to fulfill orders, interacting with challenging clients, and learning every aspect of business management by making mistakes. I firmly said that this event would exclusively be about the debut of my store. They were no longer successful in making me feel bad. My parents became irate and said they might not attend the opening at all when they saw that I wasn't going to back down. I told them that was their decision for the first time in my life. I was left feeling bewildered and frustrated by the entire event. Instead of being proud and encouraging, they were attempting to minimize my achievement by making it about Emma once more. Here I was, their kid, accomplishing something important all by myself. They didn't think I deserved a celebration of my own, even though I was an adult with my own company. I was no longer a 6-year-old who could be persuaded to share his wonderful day, but the same patterns from my early years were reoccurring. Regardless of who came to celebrate, I made the decision that my store opening would be my time alone. Update 1. I got hundreds of answers after venting my unhappiness online, but one message in particular truly resonated with me. My parents had unwittingly given me the ideal opportunity for retaliation, someone pointed out. The more I considered it, the more obvious it became. A college graduation would inevitably be eclipsed by the opening of my business, especially when I could give everyone first dibs on my merchandise. Directly beneficial things always pique people's curiosity more. I agreed to my parents' proposal in a message rather than continuing to oppose the combined celebration. I informed them that I had changed my mind and that I believed they were correct to gather everyone for a single, large celebration. My parents were ecstatic at my seeming change of heart, likely believing that their guilt trips had won me over once more. I continued to be cooperative throughout all of the planning sessions, nodding in agreement as they talked about food possibilities and decoration ideas. As I had anticipated, my parents took full charge of organizing the celebration. They planned the catering, made arrangements with all of our family members and guests, and reserved a pricey location, all in keeping with Emma's graduation theme. Every choice, including the color scheme and the kind of music to be played, was created with Emma's preferences in mind. The invitation card served as the last piece of evidence that I had made the proper choice. The phrase "celebrating Emma's graduation" was printed across the top of these ornate, gold-bordered cards. Nowhere, not even in the small print at the bottom, was my store announcement mentioned. This was exactly what I had planned, but my parents undoubtedly believed I would be unhappy. Everyone in attendance would be completely taken aback by my revelation because they were all focused on Emma's accomplishment. During those weeks, I worked quietly to finish the details of my store debut and prepare my own contents. My parents had invited almost everyone, so the party location was just what you would anticipate. I couldn't have timed my announcement more perfectly. The bartender noticed me and gave me a fresh glass of champagne just after all the remarks but before the cake cutting. As I got up, everyone's eyes were on me, presumably anticipating another homage to Emma. While my parents were busy welcoming guests, I worked with the venue personnel to create my promotional materials earlier. I didn't need sentimental appeals or flowery wording, my declaration was direct. I just said that next month, after years of developing my online business, I will establish my first physical location. Groups gathered around me in a matter of minutes as people inquired about the store's location, the goods I would be carrying, and the exclusive deals I would be providing to friends and relatives. My aunt was now showing everyone photos of my products on her phone after she had just completed speaking about Emma's academic accomplishments. There was a noticeable difference between my parents' private and public responses. As family members congratulated me, they forced smiles and nodded in agreement, maintaining their typical flawless demeanor in front of the guests throughout the evening. However, I could sense the stress in their body language, my dad's jaw tightening whenever someone brought up my store, and my mom's hands trembling a little while she served cake. Emma disappeared from her own graduation celebration shortly after her champagne toast failed, and hardly anyone listened to her rehearsed speech about her time in college. My mom's facade eventually broke when the last relative left and the caterers started to clear up. The mom, who had taught me to share the spotlight for years, confronted me and accused me of spoiling her daughter's graduation celebration. Calmly, I stated my stance, stating that I had just announced my business as scheduled and that this joint celebration was their idea, not mine. My father's response demonstrated the extent of their partiality. He jumped right to blaming me of jealousy rather than admitting that they had been treated unfairly for years. I had seen this trend since I was a little child. Any attempt to assert my own space was viewed as selfish or envious. After 20 years of holding back, I finally said it. I detailed every celebration, birthday, and moment that had been appropriated and turned into Emma's unique time. For once, I was just expressing the facts about their behavior pattern and wasn't requesting sympathy or compassion. My parents resorted to their standard defensive tactic, making the same claims they had made all through my early years. They brought up Emma's terrible beginning, her desertion, and the fact that she didn't know her biological family, which made her need further help. These were the same excuses I'd heard at every family get-together, school function, and birthday where my needs had been neglected. However, I didn't feel bad about what they said this time. I had worked with my therapist for years to process these emotions, realizing that their actions were motivated by their desire to be viewed as saviors rather than Emma's needs. We were all unaware that Emma had come back to the location and was waiting in the doorway when we confronted her. Putting on the dramatic show that had always worked so well for her, she rushed into the room with mascara streaming down her face. She blamed me, saying that I was envious of her position in the family and had always detested her. In actuality, I had spent my early years attempting to be the ideal big brother, giving up my personal space and festivities, all the while being informed that it was never enough. Instead of being the recipient of our parents' unrelenting favoritism, she was now behaving as though she had been the target of my anger. The days after the celebration demonstrated how ingrained my parents' partiality was. They concentrated only on Emma's injured feelings, ignoring the ways in which their actions had exacerbated the problem. They contacted me over and over again, requesting not just an apology, but also that I pay for Emma's vacation so she could get over the stress. Their request was quite ridiculous. They wanted me to pay Emma thousands of dollars only because people were genuinely interested in my business success rather than Emma's graduation. They demanded that I give them my hard-earned money so they could pay for Emma's vacation after she felt overshadowed at one party. My answer to their demands was straightforward. I left. I was done playing their game after years of attempting to be understanding and accommodating. My parents appeared surprised that, unlike so many times in the past, I wouldn't give in and apologize right away. Their trump card had usually been Emma's tears, but they weren't working this time. Nothing would ever change, as evidenced by their inability to recognize the hypocrisy. Emma was furious over sharing attention at one occasion, but I had been forced to share or give up the spotlight at every celebration for 20 years. I had already attempted to discuss these matters with my family. I made several attempts to discuss my parents' partiality with them during my late teens and early 20s. I tried a variety of strategies, including polite conversations at family dinners, long emails outlining my emotions, and even suggested family therapy. The identical response was given to each attempt. Emma had a difficult start in life. This expression became their go-to justification for anything I said that hurt or irritated them. When I was 19, I sobbed as I talked about how lonely I felt at my own birthday parties during a particularly trying conversation. All my mother could do was remind me of Emma's desertion. I eventually came to terms with the fact that my parents couldn't see their own actions clearly after years of this habit. At the age of 21, I left their home and rented a modest apartment across town with the first earnings from my internet business. Our relationship has grown more surface level ever since. We occasionally visit one another at family get-togethers, send each other birthday greetings, and share significant life events, but there is no longer any genuine connection. No in-depth discussions or emotional exchanges. I've stopped expecting them to change or see things my way, but they still don't understand why I've separated myself and continue to blame me for not being more understanding of Emma's needs. Update 2. My parents surprised me with an even more absurd demand just when I thought they had had enough of the commotion surrounding the graduation party. They unexpectedly showed up at my flat prior to the big opening of my store. They sat uneasily on my couch at first, acting casual as they inquired about the store's preparations. However, they then disclosed their true motivation for coming. They wanted me to appoint Emma as the store manager. Their argument was that she shouldn't have to go through the typical job search process like everyone else because she had a college degree. They seemed to believe that I had a duty to give Emma a ready-made job because I had worked so hard to develop this company over the years. When my parents enumerated Emma's qualifications for running my store, the conversation swiftly turned bizarre. My dad claims that her primary qualifications were that she was pretty, smart, and had a general business degree, as if being physically attractive had anything to do with managing a retail establishment. I had studied customer service, inventory control, and company operations for years, but it seems that Emma's beauty outweighed all of that knowledge. My mom didn't hesitate to suggest that Emma should also cut the ribbon during the store opening when I mockingly inquired if they wanted me to do anything more for their precious daughter. What was she thinking? Emma might feel less important at the graduation celebration, but it would make up for it. They believed Emma deserved more publicity. Therefore they wanted me to give a management position in my company to someone who had no retail expertise and allow her to serve as the face of my store opening. However, this was no longer about birthday celebrations or toy swapping. This was my source of income, my career accomplishment, and something I had created on my own without their assistance. They reacted to my rejection in the same way they had always done. By manipulating my emotions. The guilt trips came first, followed by charges of selfishness and threats. With the same firmness that she had used to make me share my birthdays, my mom offered them an ultimatum. Either I give Emma what she wanted, or they wouldn't come to the store opening. Emma's arrogant expression as they threatened me informed me that she expected me to comply, just as I always did. They were all startled when I instructed them not to come at all and agreed to their requirements instead. Even without my immediate family present, the store opening surpassed all of my expectations. The room was crowded with my extended family, devoted clients from my internet business, and encouraging friends. I told my family members the truth without feeling ashamed or sorry when they nervously inquired about my parents' absence. Some expressed sympathy, while others were uneasy, but I didn't care about controlling other people's emotions in relation to my family's circumstances. After opening for several months, my store is doing quite well. Expecting me to come apologizing like I had so many times before, my parents tried their customary silent treatment, but now their silence is peaceful instead of terrible. To fit their idea of the ideal family, I no longer feel the need to shrink myself. Caught my wife cheating, moved on, and found new love, until my ex tried to run over me and my new girlfriend in a jealous rage. I've been a lurker on Reddit for a while, but today I finally have a story to tell. Since my life has been so chaotic, I haven't had time to write about it, let alone breathe, even though I've wanted to post this for months. I can now talk about what occurred to me now that everything has been resolved, and perhaps it will assist someone else avoid a similar circumstance. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm a 36-year-old man who married a 35-year-old woman named Carolyn for what I believe to be eternity. In the end, I will never be able to reclaim those 6 years of my life. At least I kept telling myself that our marriage wasn't awful. When we connected on Instagram, I truly believed I had struck gold. She seemed ideal, humorous, and beautiful. My early years were quite chaotic, so I was especially alert for warning signs. My dad was the victim of severe abuse from my mom, who would yell matches at 3 in the morning, throw plates all over the room, and basically take everything because he loved us and didn't want to leave. You can know that when I was dating Carolyn, I was constantly on guard. I spent 2 years scrutinizing every aspect of her life, including how she handled money, stress, and waiters, basically, everything you should look for before committing to someone. To be completely honest, she aced every test. She was compassionate, tolerant, and giving, qualities my mother lacked. I believed I had done my research, thoroughly examined her, and discovered a decent woman. I even recall telling my closest friend that I had finally ended my family's abusive cycle. I was mistaken about that one, man. But I'll talk about that later. We got married in a gorgeous ceremony, purchased a charming suburban home, and began what I hoped would be our happily ever after. I had no idea that I was about to enter a nightmare, albeit a distinct one from the one I had known growing up. About 2 years in, everything started to go south. I mean extremely south. Every month, like clockwork, we had huge blowout fights instead of being the couple everyone envied. It was also constantly over the most ridiculous stuff, like the dishes in the sink, my late work, her hanging out with her friends, or even the TV shows we watched. I really thought we could work things out, so I was working so hard to keep our marriage intact. This was the woman who would surprise me with weekend excursions and leave small messages in my lunchbox. How we had gone from that to her yelling at me because I had purchased the incorrect brand of coffee was beyond me. I recommended couples therapy because I'm the kind of man who thinks things should be fixed rather than thrown away. In fact, I pleaded for it. We attended exactly one session, and holy hell, what a fiasco that proved to be. Carolyn replied, "It's your idea, so it's your expense." So I selected a really competent therapist who specialized in married couples, scheduled all the meetings, and even paid for it out of my own pocket. The therapist began highlighting some communication problems and raising the possibility that Carolyn wasn't managing conflict in a healthy way. She cried uncontrollably, said the therapist was assaulting her, and vowed never to return. I was attempting to make her look crazy, she continued, calling the therapist a quack. I later learned that her father had passed away just before our arguments became increasingly heated. Grief does strange things to people, so I tried to be understanding, but she refused to talk about it, refused to receive assistance, and continued to get angrier and more aloof. Her yelling battles could wake up the entire neighborhood, but she never got physical or broke anything. On one occasion, our neighbors believed someone was being murdered and phoned the police. Carolyn was shouting at me because I had neglected to get her dry cleaners. We eventually settled into this strange pattern in which we essentially just shared a room and occasionally had sex. We would get up, leave for work, return home, have dinner while watching television, and then retire to bed. Repeat after rinsing. We hardly spoke anymore, which is the only reason the fights decreased in frequency. But I was still foolishly in love with her. That's sad, isn't it? I kept reminiscing about our early years, telling myself that we could return there with enough effort. I firmly believed in the for better or worse part of our marriage vows. I suppose I overlooked the fact that those vows also included forsaking all others. I'll get to that part though. I was brought up to believe that marriage is holy, so perhaps I should have recognized the warning signs. You stick it out and work on it unless someone is being hit or cheated on. It turns out that I was unaware of one of those deal breakers that was about to happen. Allow me to explain how everything went wrong. I work at this dull corporate job, nothing special, just your average mid-level job, pushing papers and going to meetings all day. The kind where you're not important enough to fly first class, but you're important enough to travel. I had been dispatched to a business expo in a different state, where I was expected to spend 4 days networking with potential clients and acting as though I was interested in PowerPoint presentations. My life chose to take a huge turn for the worse at this point. Our firm back home experienced a serious issue 3 days into the expo, something involving servers crashing and losing customer data, the usual corporate emergency fare. Everyone was called back early by my supervisor. I quickly reserved the first trip home because I'm the devoted worker that I am, or perhaps I'm just a fool, you decide. I was thinking of this lovely, dumb concept. Do you remember the romantic reunions in films where the husband surprised his wife? Yes, I did believe that would occur. I planned this surprise during my whole Uber trip from the airport. I stopped at a posh florist and spent $80 on her favorite flowers, which were pricey purple orchids that she always said brought back memories of our first date. I even got her some champagne and some of her favorite high-end chocolates. I believed that this might be a new beginning for us. I thought that this impromptu gesture would remind her of the reasons she fell in love with me in the first place, since we had been acting so distant lately. With my chocolates and flowers, I felt like the greatest husband in the world when I arrived home at 2 p.m. Her car was in the driveway, which made sense because she worked from home on Thursdays, and the house appeared to be typical. However, I recall a few strange things, such as her favorite playlist playing from upstairs, which she only ever listened to when she was feeling particularly upbeat. Though I assume she had a buddy over for lunch or something, there were 2 wine glasses in the sink. God, I was such a fool. I was so eager to surprise her that I went right upstairs to our bedroom. Although I could hear other sounds and the music was growing louder, my brain was not comprehending what they meant. Do you remember the scene in horror films where everyone yells at the character to keep the door closed? That character was me. My world fell apart when I pulled open the door to my own bedroom and turned the doorknob. That 1 second turned every single pleasant memory, trusting moment, and I love you into ash. I will never be able to forget what I witnessed in that bedroom until the day I die. Beneath some strange guy in our bed was my wife, the person I had loved, supported and built a life with for 6 years. The same bed where I had hugged her after her father passed away, and where we had discussed having children in the future. She was acting as though I didn't exist and that our marriage meant nothing at all, not even attempting to keep quiet about it. As I stood there, a total moron, watching the flowers I had purchased fall to the ground and scurry like cockroaches when the lights are turned on. The man had the audacity to try to scurry past me like I was a doorman, and I will never forget this. I lost it while he was fumbling to put on his clothing and strewing things all over the place. Something inside of me shattered. Perhaps because I saw him with my wife or because he believed he could simply walk away from ruining my marriage. My hand was around his throat before I even realized what I was doing. It wasn't a death grip, but it was a clear signal that he wasn't simply leaving. Instead of hitting him as you might think, I gave him 2 open-handed slaps across his face, resembling a dramatic housewife from a soap show. I'm still baffled as to why I didn't just punch him instead. After I caught him with my wife, the man's expression quickly changed from one of fear to one of rage, as if he were truly going to try to fight me in my own home. Can you fathom the sheer disdain and the audacity? He probably fed him stories about being single or separated, so I'm willing to wager he was unaware that Carolyn was married. He most likely believed that I was some sort of insane ex-boyfriend. I released him before the situation worsened, not because I was afraid, but because I immediately saw that this pitiful excuse of a man wasn't worth being charged with assault. It wasn't he who promised me anything. He didn't make a vow to love and care for me till the day we die. He was just another man who was unable to control himself. The true traitor was still in that bedroom, most likely considering how to deceive her way out of this situation. My entire body trembled as I turned back to Carolyn. The lady I had dedicated my entire life to for 6 years was there, fumbling with her bra as if it were a trivial annoyance. The purple orchids I had purchased were all over the floor, most likely crushed beneath the man's running feet. She said the mirror had better lighting, so I hung it up for her last Christmas, and I just stood there watching her get ready in it. She was also taking her sweet time, as if she hadn't just ruined our entire marriage. She was avoiding my gaze in the mirror, straightening her hair nonchalantly, and behaving as though she hadn't just ruined everything we had worked so hard to create. You want to know what this woman had the audacity to say to me after I literally caught her cheating? As if I were a door-to-door salesperson who had disturbed her day, she gave me this irritated look and asked, "Why are you even back?" Nada, I'm sorry, I can explain, or any of that nonsense about fundamental human decency. The fact that I came home early and caught her cheating, in our bed, in the house we bought together, the house where I paid the majority of the mortgage, actually annoyed her. Never in my life have I wanted to strike someone so much. In reality, my hand was twitching as I recalled how satisfying it was to slap her affair partner, but I just stood there, immobilized, while she had the audacity to mutter under her breath, "You weren't supposed to be back," as if I were to blame for her early return home or that I should have called ahead to arrange a convenient time to catch her cheating. This woman's sheer outrageousness, 6 years of marriage, and this is what it meant to her. A small hiccup in her fun-filled afternoon. Do you realize what's truly broken? While all of this was going on, I could see our wedding picture on the nightstand. The same bedside table where she had placed the breakfast I had prepared for her the previous weekend. She had been telling me she was too tired for sex in the same room for the previous 3 months, but she obviously had plenty of energy for this stranger. Like a fool, I stood there thinking about all the late nights at work she had told me about, all the girls' nights out, and all the times she had mentioned going to see her mother. What was the duration of this? How many men had shared my bed with me? Carolyn was by no means finished talking, so I was about to find out. Then this woman, this nasty jerk, went totally crazy. As though I had just blown apart our marriage, she began yelling at me. "You weren't expected to return," she screamed, her face turning red and splotchy, just like when we fought. "You are to blame for this. You wouldn't have seen this if you had simply informed me that you were returning home." This woman would have earned an Olympic gold medal for her mental gymnastics. She even had the audacity to accuse me of being the one who discovered her infidelity. But hold on, things will improve. "You declined my request for an open relationship," she screamed, as if it somehow justified her actions. Yes, 6 months prior, she had asked me once in a drunken chat, and I had declined since I was a monogamist. Apparently, that meant she should do it anyhow, in her deranged thinking. "I have necessities," she continued to rant, as if I were a monster for asking my wife to be obedient. She attempted to cheat on me *nicely*, which is really insane. "I tried to do things without hurting you." How thoughtful of her. Something broke inside of me. 6 years of devotion, trust and love were reduced to "I have needs." Every kiss, "I love you," and moment we spent together were all phony. My palm trembling with anger, I took 3 steps across the room. I lifted my fist and grabbed her by the collar of the shirt I had purchased for her birthday last month. She injured me, and I wanted to hurt her too. Anything that matched the agony ripping through my chest was what I wanted her to feel. However, I couldn't do it after seeing the dread in her eyes, real, authentic fear, despite the fact that she had just shattered everything I held dear and had shown me that our entire marriage was a sham. That's not me. I'm not going to be that man. I vowed never to put that expression on anyone's face, and my mom used to stare at my dad with the same terror. So with my hands still clenched but lowered, I moved back and released a go of her shirt. To let her feel even a small portion of my suffering, the dark side of me still wishes I'd given in to that anger. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because I deserved better than to become what I've always feared. I'm glad I didn't. There I was, standing in my own bedroom, looking at this stranger in my wife's face while surrounded by crushed purple flowers. This was how our 6-year marriage ended, with her accusing me of being the one who discovered her infidelity. Standing there now was the woman who used to kiss me goodbye every morning, accusing me of failing to phone ahead to arrange for my discovery of her affair. This woman changed identities faster than a TV station the moment I released her top. She was suddenly no longer afraid. No, in all of this, she was now the victim. Really, you were going to hit me? As I turned to leave, she yelled at my back. This is the precise reason I no longer love you. You're not a man at all. She continued to speak, yelling every possible abuse as she followed me down the corridor. After 6 years of marriage, she was attempting to make me the antagonist in this tale. It was very convenient for her to go from shivering in terror to yelling abuse at the man she had just accused of hitting her. I didn't realize she wanted me to strike her until I spoke with my friend later that evening. Do you think that's possible? In order to transform herself from the unfaithful wife into the mistreated husband, she wanted me to lose my cool and give her something she could use against me. She most likely had it all figured out. She would cry about her violent husband, run to the police with a battered face, and take half of my belongings and my monthly alimony payments. I was being lured into domestic violence by the same woman who used to bring me soup when I was ill. In a weird way, the manipulation was almost impressive. I needed to leave that house. It practically smelled of treachery throughout the entire area. In our bedroom, on our linens, and in the air, their colognes and fragrances were blended together. The aroma of another guy had contaminated the same bed where I had comforted her during panic attacks. I took my keys and money and went for a drive. I found myself at my friend Mark's house. I'm grateful for Mark. After glancing at my face, he pulled out the whiskey. Mark understood precisely what I was getting into because he had already been divorced. He said it like it was. I had to get a lawyer as soon as possible. Here's the worst part though. Carolyn was working part-time at a boutique, essentially pretending to have a profession, while I was earning 6 figures. That meant I might have to pay this dishonest woman alimony in my state. Every month the same lady who had just slept with another man might deplete my finances. That's the weird thing about the legal system, even if you are the one who is cheated on, you still have to pay for it. However, Mark, being the astute jerk that he is, pointed out that adultery might alter the alimony figures. Keep a record of everything, he advised. Every email, text message, and receipt. Anything that would show she was cheating on you. In this program, there is finally some good news. Perhaps I won't have to pay for her affair partner's dates after all. My mind was still racing. I had been a contented husband and father organizing a surprise for my wife just that morning. I was now sitting in my friend's living room, searching for divorce attorneys on Google while attempting to keep my stomach from turning up whenever I thought about what I had just entered. I had no intention of attempting to mend our relationship in any way. I could be foolish enough to purchase pricey flowers for a wife who cheats, but I'm not foolish enough to overlook it. My phone started exploding when I was sitting at Mark's apartment, trying to take it all in. Carolyn allegedly made the decision to try to tear me down via text messaging because she couldn't control me in person. And holy, the things this woman sent me are unbelievable. Just last week, this woman texted me "I love you," with adorable little heart emojis. She was now providing me in-depth analyses that contrasted her affair partner's manhood with mine. In fact, she took the effort to explicitly describe in writing how much more effective he was in bed than I was. How I could never please her the way he could. How she had spent years pretending to be with me. Like she was writing a Yelp review for a lousy restaurant, she gave me an entire stinking novel detailing all of my sexual shortcomings, along with performance assessments and size measurements. After I caught her cheating in our own bed, she even had the audacity to tell me that her boyfriend had ruined her for other men, as if I would want her back. The best thing though. She was furious that I had destroyed her good thing. Do you think that's possible? As if I should have given them solitude or something, she was upset with me for interfering with her affair. She accused me of being selfish since I had ruined her chance at true happiness by returning home early without telling her. This woman was performing mental acrobatics that would have pleased Olympic judges. I'm glad Mark was there because he told me right away to take screenshots of everything. He kept shouting, "Document, document, document," and he was absolutely correct. I saw those tiny message bubbles begin to go away, one by one, not even a minute after she had finished her big tirade about her fantastic affair partner and my alleged flaws. I suppose she finally understood that when your husband earns 3 times as much as you do and a divorce is imminent, it might not be the best idea to write down your admission of infidelity. She resorted to using the same old slurs after erasing all the proof of her affair. She called me all the names in the book, but she made sure to keep her afternoon actions out of the conversation. The speed at which she shifted from boasting about her affair to acting as though it never happened was actually rather astounding. It was like witnessing someone attempt to remove evidence from a murder scene as those texts vanished in real time. Unfortunately, she was unaware that I had screenshots of every single item. She may have erased the texts, but she was unable to erase the truth or the images of them that were now securely saved in the camera roll of my phone, ready to prove to a divorce judge why I shouldn't be required to pay this lady any alimony at all. That evening, Mark proved to be a wealth of information regarding divorce. He guided me through every step I needed to take, from gathering proof to protecting my financial accounts, in between shots of whiskey. That night, I hardly slept at all, just mentally reliving everything while I browsed through my phone's evaluations of divorce attorneys. The 2 weeks that followed were a haze of meetings with various lawyers. Some appeared to have barely passed the legal exam, while others sought retainers that were more expensive than my automobile. Finally, I came across Lucas, who didn't need me to sell a kidney to pay him and who seemed to genuinely care about my issue. Lucas really grinned when I showed him the screenshots of Carolyn's texting tantrum, and the photos of the condition of our bedroom. Although he was pragmatic, he acknowledged that we had a strong case to reduce or possibly do away with alimony. He cautioned me that regardless of the reason for the dissolution of the marriage, judges in our state have a tendency to favor the lower-earning spouse. Nevertheless, he pledged to fight for me until the death. To be honest, the first positive development since this horror began was simply having someone knowledgeable and supportive in my corner. Serving Carolyn with divorce papers was the exciting part that followed. Are you curious about what this woman did? For 3 weeks, she avoided the server by altering her schedule, acting as though she wasn't home, and even having her mother inform the server that she had relocated to Florida. She had likely not exercised honestly for months when the server finally caught her leaving a yoga session. She took the entire 30 days permitted by law to reply, even at that point. A move of pure hatred. She was aware that I was paying Lucas by the hour, so she knew precisely what she was doing, dragging everything out as long as possible. And Carolyn became the queen of petty once the proceedings really got underway. She claimed she couldn't locate bank statements that I knew she had, forgot to bring necessary paperwork to meetings, was late for every appointment and insisted on thorough inventory of every item in the house, down to the last spoon. These absurd settlement offers kept coming in from her lawyer. In addition to wanting my 401k in the house, she also wanted alimony. This woman, whom I found cheating on, asked for half of my retirement funds, which was really outrageous. The most annoying aspect? She was still seeing her affair partner, and we had been apart for months by this time. Yes, mutual friends told me about that. She is trying to make my life as unpleasant as possible while living her best life. She would abruptly alter her mind or make new demands whenever we were on the verge of reaching an agreement. She seemed to take sick joy in seeing me squander money on legal bills. I could almost hear her giggling all the way to her boyfriend's bedroom whenever Lucas had to answer one of her absurd proposals. I attempted to re-enter the dating scene while Carolyn was working tirelessly to prolong the divorce and deplete my finances. I went through a phase of hooking up with random women from dating apps, which isn't my proudest moment. Downloaded Bumble, Tinder and other apps. I tried to persuade myself that this was what it meant to move on by having a few one-night stands. However, each subsequent morning felt worse than the one before. Every pointless hookup served as a reminder to me of why I had declined Carolyn's proposal of an open relationship. That way of life simply wasn't for me. I've always been the kind of guy who wants to have a genuine connection, exchange inside jokes, and wake up next to the same person every morning. I felt empty inside from the whole casual sex situation, as if I were attempting to fill a hole with the wrong form. Other than job, divorce paperwork and failed hookups, I needed something to keep my mind busy. I used to read a lot, like stay up all night to complete a book, until Carolyn came along and life became hectic with 60-hour work weeks and monthly shouting bouts. I therefore chose to go to this small independent bookstore downtown one Saturday rather than browsing through dating apps or monitoring the emails of my lawyer. Cats napping in the windows, creaking wooden floorboards, and that wonderful old book smell, you know the kind. I felt totally disoriented as I stood in the sci-fi area because, obviously, the entire genre had changed while I was occupied with preserving my marriage. I'm referring to these big novels, series that were maybe 15 books long, and titles that I couldn't even pronounce. This woman next to me actually laughed. Not in a nasty way, just this gentle, delighted sound, which must have made me appear very pitiful, just staring at the shelves with this perplexed expression on my face. When I turned to face her, she simply smiled and asked if I needed assistance while holding this enormous book that might have been used as a weapon. I told her that I didn't know where to begin, but I was searching for some decent science fiction. The next thing I knew, she was teaching me the basics of contemporary science fiction while we sat in these comfortable seats in the corner. She was also quite enthusiastic about it. When she talked about her favorite novels, her eyes glowed, and she had the cute habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was thrilled about a series. A brief book recommendation evolved into a 2-hour discussion covering everything from contemporary space operas to classic Asimov. I told her about my old college faves, and she told me about a parallel universe series she enjoyed. For the first time in months, I had a meaningful conversation free of attorneys, divorce documents, and awkward Tinder pickup lines. I forgot all about Carolyn and the turmoil for those 2 hours. I was just a man discussing books with a stunning woman who genuinely seemed to be listening. I eventually plucked up the confidence to ask for her number after our spontaneous book club meeting. Something about her made me feel like a youngster again. Even though my hands were shaking as I put it in my phone. Pretty pitiful for a 36-year-old man. With her number, her recommendation for the 3 body problem and the first sincere smile I'd felt in months, I left that bookstore. It struck me how different our text exchange that evening seemed from all those pointless Tinder texts as I continued reading it again. Something genuine was there. I knew I had to disclose my ongoing divorce to her on our first actual date. I had mentally practiced this exchange a dozen times, anticipating her to flee when I brought up my insane soon-to-be ex-wife. However, Emma, yes, that is her name, simply took a drink of her wine and replied, "Thank you for being honest. At least you are addressing your baggage, which we all have." As simple as that. No criticism, strange glances, or awkward attempts to divert the conversation. She also made the joke that she wouldn't have to question whether a man she was dating was secretly married if he was going through a divorce. Emma was just the opposite of Carolyn. Emma would explain things gently during conflicts, while Carolyn would yell. Emma freely gave Carolyn the attention she demanded. She showed genuine interest in my work, recalled little details about topics I had brought up weeks prior, and never once made me feel guilty about going through a divorce. I felt heard and seen for the first time in years. The finest aspect. When we first met, I wasn't even trying to find her. In a bookstore, 2 people connected over science fiction without the use of dating apps or friend hookups. This stuff cannot be made up. After 5 months of dating Emma, I was completely smitten. She made me feel comfortable in every way, including sending me book recommendations while I was at work, leaving little notes in the books she lent me, and paying attention when I shared my day. However, Carolyn continued to put up obstacle after obstacle in the divorce process. She would always come up with a new way to drag things out whenever I thought we were almost done. Missing signatures, contested assets, suddenly remembered joint accounts. You name it, she tried everything. Emma was quite patient during this entire ordeal. She never complained about being with a technically married man or put pressure on me regarding the divorce. She would simply support me during the annoying phone conversations with Lucas and reassure me that this would also pass. I was at last beginning to feel content once more, not content to merely act that way. Naturally, everything went totally haywire at that same moment. I had just spent a wonderful Saturday with Emma. After shopping and eating lunch at this adorable tiny cafe, we were returning to her car in the mall parking lot. We were discussing what movie to watch that evening as the sun was going down. I'm listening to her giggle about something one moment and then everything in my life erupts into pandemonium. This engine screamed like if someone had stepped on the throttle pedal and I heard it before I saw it. As I turned to face the sound, I saw that this car was speeding directly at us, primarily toward Emma. I grabbed her arm out of pure impulse to pull her away, but I wasn't quick enough. Her leg was clipped by the automobile, and I watched in horror as it simply broke. I will never be able to forget the sound of her bone cracking and her scream. I tried to protect her body with mine as I slid down with her when she fell onto the pavement. I was about to dial 911 when I heard the tires squealing once more. The car's engine was still roaring as it backed up after colliding with another car. It dawned on me then that this was no accident. This driver was attempting to strike us once more. Emma's leg was bent at this terrible angle and she was crying in agony. I knew that if I didn't move her, we would both die. With my pulse racing so fiercely I felt it could burst, I grabbed her by the arms and pulled her between 2 parked cars. Every time she moved, she cried out in agony, but I had to continue. The car slammed into the cars we were hiding between as it charged forward once more. Every auto alarm in the area was activated by the crash's extreme violence. At this moment, people were yelling and racing toward us from all directions with their phones out. The entire parking lot was in disarray, with people shouting, car alarms going off, and Emma sobbing beside me. I swear to God that time stopped as the driver's door opened. Carolyn was there, getting out of the car as if she were going to a dinner party. She appeared just like she had when I last saw her at our lawyer's office, but now she had a crazy expression in her eyes that I had never seen before. With her hair styled flawlessly as usual and wearing the same blazer she used to wear to work, she appeared as though she hadn't just attempted to kill 2 people in broad daylight. It was made much more horrifying by the stark contrast between her normal appearance and what she had just done. This was my soon-to-be ex-wife, who had reportedly been monitoring us and decided that if she couldn't have me, she'd rather see me dead. This wasn't just some drunk driver or random road rage incident. She intentionally targeted Emma, who had never done anything but make me happy again, in her attempt to kill me. Something shattered inside of me when I heard Emma's whimpers of anguish and looked at her fractured leg. She had recently attempted to murder an innocent lady whose only crime was dating her soon-to-be ex-husband. So this was no longer just about Carolyn and me. Fearful that Carolyn might have a weapon or try to complete what she started, I kept one eye on her while holding Emma close to keep her calm. It was like watching someone change into a monster in front of me when Carolyn got out of that car. I hadn't been married to this woman for 6 years. Even the woman I had caught cheating in our bed wasn't this one. This was something very different, a furious being posing as my ex-wife. I was hit hard by the reality of what had just transpired. In fact, Carolyn had made a deliberate, planned attempt to kill us, not in a moment of rage. She must have followed us, waited for the perfect opportunity, and then made a conscious attempt to run us down in the middle of the day. I honestly believed she was going to try to complete what the car hadn't been able to achieve when she began to approach us, her heels clicking on the pavement like some kind of twisted countdown. Except for her eyes, which were blazing with a fierce hatred I had never witnessed, not even during our most heated arguments, her face was utterly blank. Thankfully, she was seized by a man who looked like a linebacker before she could get to us. Like some furious animal straining against a leash, she continued to try to push forward even after that. While I was attempting to calm Emma and examine her wounds, I couldn't take my eyes off Carolyn. This lady had slept next to me for 6 years, sat across from me at innumerable dinners, and discussed starting a family with me. Now she was here, having just attempted to kill my girlfriend and me in a mall parking lot. My head was spinning from the difference between those two versions of her. When someone you once loved enough to marry tries to kill you, how do you handle it? An ambulance arrived after the police, who were siren blaring. Emma was in excruciating pain as they loaded her into it, but she made an effort to grin at me to reassure me that she was all right. While the officers were handcuffing her, Carolyn lost all mental faculties. "It's only been a year, and you're already walking around with *that*," she screamed at the top of her lungs. Everyone around us recoiled at the sheer vitriol in her voice. In front of dozens of witnesses, she had just tried murder, and in her deranged mind, she somehow was the victim. That's when I realized how completely insane it all was. I genuinely walked in on this woman cheating on me in our bed with a male stranger. She was the one who violated our marriage vows, accused me of being the one who caught her, and, out of spite, prolonged our divorce. She is currently being detained for attempted murder while yelling about betrayal. Olympic-level mental gymnastics were displayed. She was acting as though I was the terrible guy for moving on after she ruined our marriage by infidelity. I felt as though I was in a distorted parallel universe as I stood there in that crowded parking lot, witnessing my ex-wife being crammed into the back of a police car while still yelling profanities and having my girlfriend's blood on my hands from where I attempted to assist her. My wife, who used to make me breakfast on Sundays and send me adorable texts while I was at work, recently attempted to kill 2 people in cold blood. What's the most absurd aspect? She really seemed to think she had a right to do it, as though I was the bad guy in this tale because I caught her cheating. I kept expecting Emma to tell me it was over every time I went to see her in the hospital. Who could blame her after all? His insane soon-to-be ex-wife wants to use her as a hood ornament 5 months after they started dating. Most individuals don't sign up for that kind of baggage. Because she had the misfortune of dating me, she had to endure months of physical treatment and had her leg in this enormous cast. When I informed her who the driver was, I was unable to look her in the eye. Instead, I just gazed at the hospital floor, waiting for the inevitable, "I can't do this anymore" reaction. "Well, at least we know she'll have plenty of time to work on her road rage in prison," Emma replied, just reaching for my hand. In fact, she joked about it. This woman was attempting to comfort me while she lay in a hospital bed with pins in her leg due to my ex-wife's attempted murder. She gave me a weird look when I asked her if she was certain she wanted to stay with me after everything. "Do you really believe that I will allow her to win? I'm going to walk again absolutely fine, and she's going to prison. I think I'm going to win this one." The office of the district attorney was obsessed with this case. It turns out that the entire event was captured in stunning high definition by many security cameras. The video was terrifying. Carolyn's automobile was the first to circle the parking lot, resembling a shark searching for food. She then parked and watched us for a bit. This, according to the DA, was important because it demonstrated premeditation. She didn't simply chance to see us and lose it. Instead, she tracked us, waited for the right opportunity, and made a conscious attempt to kill Emma. Before she shot it directly at us, they had video of her passing by our area at least 3 times. The security footage resembled a scene from a horror film. You could see how she waited until we were in the ideal position and then simply floored it as soon as she saw us. The first blow that shattered Emma's leg, Carolyn backing up for another attempt, and me pulling Emma between the cars were all captured on camera. According to the DA, it was one of the most obvious attempted murder cases she had ever seen. There is no place for justifications of heat of passion or transitory insanity. This was a cold-blooded, well-planned attempted murder that was captured on many cameras from various perspectives. The most bizarre aspect: before attempting to kill us, she can be seen on the video inspecting her makeup in the rear-view mirror. She is not trying to commit double homicide. Rather, she is merely adjusting her lipstick as if she were going to a business meeting. This, according to the prosecutor, was another nail in her coffin because it demonstrated that she was fully conscious of and in charge of her actions. She wasn't a woman who lost her temper out of jealousy. Rather, she meticulously prepared to kill her ex-husband's new lover and meticulously applied cosmetics for her subsequent mugshot. Because, evidently, plotting to kill your ex's new girlfriend is more important than dividing up the china collection, the entire divorce process was put on hold. For months, I alternated between the courthouse, the hospital where Emma was recovering, and my job. Initially, my supervisor was kind, but I could tell his patience was running thin after I had to leave work for legal reasons 10 times. My ex-wife couldn't tolerate the fact that I moved on after she cheated, so I was living in the courthouse, burning through PTO like crazy, and spending hours with prosecutors. The trial itself was akin to witnessing a master lesson in the art of incarceration. Prosecutors have an ever-increasing mound of evidence. First, there were the security cameras, which showed Carolyn attempting to assassinate Emma from 6 distinct perspectives. The parade of witnesses followed, and it appeared like everyone in the parking lot had stayed to testify. This wasn't an accident, according to the stories of the soccer mom who witnessed the entire incident while carrying groceries, the teenager who captured it all on his phone, and the retired police officer who seized Carolyn before she could complete her task. This was an open-air murder attempt. Even though Emma's leg was still in a cast, she looked amazing on the stand. Without crying, she recounted her experience of seeing the automobile approaching, the agony of her leg breaking, and the fear of knowing Carolyn was returning for another attempt. I also had to testify, telling the jury about the threatening texts, the divorce drama, and how I discovered Carolyn cheating. Carolyn sat there the entire time, wiping tissues at her eyes and attempting to look regretful. The jurors saw through it all. The verdict found it guilty on all counts, including reckless endangerment, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder. However, things became frustrating when the 12-year sentence was announced. She only has that. She was sentenced to 12 years for premeditated attempted murder, but if she behaved well, she may be released much sooner. Her entire, "I'm so sorry, I wasn't thinking clearly," charade was bought off by the judge. She sobbed as she described how she lost control and deeply regretted her actions. As I sit there, I consider how she looked at her makeup before attempting to murder us. I was given the following explanation by the prosecutors. First-time offender, no past record, expressed regret, etc. But really, 12 years? She made a cold-blooded attempt to kill 2 people. She planned it, tracked us, and if the bystander hadn't stopped her, she would have tried a 3rd time. Emma might have passed away. I might have perished. Additionally, if Carolyn behaves well in prison, she might be released in less than 10 years. You can try to kill someone in front of dozens of witnesses and still receive a shorter sentence than a man caught using drugs, which is only one of the peculiarities of the legal system. What really grabbed me though? Carolyn actually had the audacity to turn to us during the sentencing process and apologize, stating that she wasn't herself that day, as if there were ever a time when it was acceptable to try to kill people in a parking lot. Emma refused to give her the satisfaction of an answer, instead just staring her down the entire time. Even though 12 years wasn't what we had hoped for, it was at least 12 years without having to peer over our shoulder in parking lots. It's funny how a judge's viewpoint on alimony can be significantly altered by a murder attempt. Following the criminal trial, the divorce process abruptly became quite straightforward. Carolyn, who looked amazing in her orange jumpsuit, had to attend via video link from prison. The judge quickly put an end to her lawyer's attempt to fight for part of my assets. It turns out that judges don't feel too sorry for spouses who attempt to kill their former partner's new companions. The court isn't in the business of rewarding attempted murderers with alimony, the judge actually stated, and I quote this. She received exactly everything she had before the marriage, her personal belongings, her clothing, and her jail commissary account. Her lawyer's expression was priceless as the judge turned down each and every one of their demands. No claim to the house, no alimony, no portion of my 401k, nothing. She ultimately played herself after spending months dragging out the divorce, making absurd requests, and postponing appointments. She may have gotten anything in the divorce if she hadn't tried to make Emma a speed bump. Rather, she received divorce papers that essentially stated, "You get nothing," and a prison cell. However, I was unable to remain in that flat. Too many memories of that guy walking in on her. They were always there when I walked through the bedroom door. Emma and I discovered this fantastic location nearer to the city center. In fact, it's far nicer than my last apartment, has a great view of the city and, most importantly, the bedroom isn't haunted by the ghost of my cheating ex-wife. Emma is now completely recovered. It's hardly noticeable that her leg was ever fractured. She quips that since it permanently got rid of my psychotic ex, getting struck by a car was completely worth it. Dark humor, but whatever gets you through nearly getting killed is better, isn't it? I occasionally question whether I could have prevented all of this. Perhaps when she began picking fights over nothing, I should have recognized the warning signs. When she declined to continue couples therapy, perhaps I should have fled. To be honest though, insanity doesn't always raise a giant red signal. Sometimes it goes unnoticed until it tries to kill your lover in a parking lot. I can say I'm truly happy now, at least. Since we met through science fiction books and are currently living our own wild story with a happy conclusion, Emma and I are discussing getting married next spring. Carolyn will undoubtedly go eventually, but that is the purpose of restraining orders. In addition, Emma's father, who teaches firearms, ensured that we both obtained concealed carry licenses in case Carolyn decided to attempt for a second round after she leaves. Document everything, be on your watch, and maybe stay away from mall parking lots if you're going through a divorce or have strange ex-partners. Additionally, if you're seeing someone new after a divorce, you might want to investigate their background first, or at the very least, make sure they're not the kind of person who would try to kill someone over a split. Reddit, I appreciate you reading my bizarre tale. I'm interested in reading all of your comments, particularly the ones about cars. I guess your ex-wife really drove that relationship into the ground, is Emma's personal favorite. Oh, and I still go to the bookshop with Emma. No, we no longer park in that shopping center.